Via screen. Edit.
September Montana Land Information Advisory Council meeting. We're going to start with introductions, and I'm going to go down the list of members as you appear on the members list on the council website. So we'll have council members introduce themselves first, and then we'll ask members of the public to introduce yourselves as well. So I'm Jenny Stapp. I'm the state librarian and chair of the council. Robert, I saw you join us.
Yes, hello. Introduce myself, I suppose. Robert All. I work in the geospatial group of the Forest Service, and I represent the Montana Association of Geographic Information Professionals.
Glad you could be with us.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Dawn?
I'm Dawn Anderson with Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, representing a state agency. I'm the Geographic Information Data Services Bureau Chief.
Thanks, Dawn. Alan Armstrong. Alan, you may be muted.
I don't actually see him showing any audio at all.
Alan, if you don't have audio, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. I believe I saw Quinn Ness representing Tim Bottenfield. Quinn, do you want to introduce yourself? Quinn, do you have audio? Let's move on to Mike. Morning, Mike.
Good morning, Mike Bosleman from Department of Transportation. I'm the administrator of the Information Services Division representing state government.
Thanks, Mike. Gordy, I think I saw you on.
Gordy Kahn, Department of Revenue Property Assessment Division.
Thanks for being here. Janet?
Yes, Janet Cornish. I'm owner and principal of Community Development Services in Butte. I'm a community development consultant and adjunct professor at Montana Tech.
Thanks for being here. I don't know that I saw Representative Dooling.
She said she might be able to make it. I'm not sure she's on yet.
Okay.
And Jenny, John Tubbs.
Hi, Director Tubbs. Thanks for being here.
You bet.
Frank, I think I saw Frank.
Hello, Frank Dewar, Gallatin County GIS. I'm here representing local governments.
Thanks, Frank. Elena? Elena, I'm not sure if you're muted.
Yeah, Elena's mute icon is on.
Let's go on to Jerry. Is Jerry on?
Jenny, this is Quinn Ness. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, Quinn.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. Excellent. Did you want to introduce yourself, Quinn? We can no longer hear you.
Quinn Ness, representing State CIO Tim Bottenfield.
Great. Thanks, Tim. Is Jerry or Carl with us? We'll move on.
Carl actually goes by John Healy, and he was on last time and he was one of the numbers listed, but kept getting booted off. So just so you know, that might be the 406 number we're seeing.
I see. Good. Matt.
Matt Heller, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, DOI rep.
Thanks, Matt. Did I see Molly? We'll move on then to Valentine.
Valentine Hoff at the Fire Center, College of Forestry, University of Montana, representing the Montana University System.
And Lee.
There we go. Lee Mackholtz with the City of Missoula, representing local government.
Thanks, Lee. And just to point out to everyone in the chat, Elaine is on her phone and introduces herself as a representative from the Forest Service representing USDA. Catherine.
Hi, I'm Catherine Maynard. I'm with the Natural Resource Conservation Service, and I'm representing the USDA.
Thanks, Catherine. I don't see Senator Sesso.
Good morning. This is Elena. Can you hear me now?
Good morning, Elena. Yes, thank you.
Sorry, I just figured out the coding. So yes, I have voice. Good morning, everybody.
Eric.
Hi, this is Eric Spangenberg. I'm with Lewis and Clark County and City of Helena GIS office, and I'm representing local government.
Dan.
Everybody hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Hi, this is Dan Staley. I'm surveyor at Staley Engineering and Associates. We're an employee-owned company, and I'm here representing the Montana Association of Registered Land Surveyors, MARL.
Thanks, Dan. Did I miss any council members? Erin, will you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, my name is Erin Fashaway. I'm the state GIS coordinator.
And Marlis?
Marla Stark with the State Library. I'm just the administration work around here.
Troy.
Yeah, morning. Troy Blanford with the Water Information at the State Library. I have a LiDAR update for you a little bit later today.
Thanks. Ken Wall.
Ken Wall with President of Geodata Services and also a member of the State Library Commission.
Jessica Mitchell.
Good morning. I am with the Spatial Analysis Lab of the Montana Natural Heritage Program, and I'll be providing the council today with land cover updates.
Great. Brian Soliday.
Hi, I'm Brian Soliday. I'm a sales executive with One Spatial out of Vienna, Virginia, but I'm based here in Frederick, Colorado.
Glad you could be with us, Brian.
Thanks.
Michael Kruger.
Hi, I'm a GIS manager with HDR Engineering based out of Billings, Montana. I will be giving the Montana Association of GIS Professionals report later in the meeting. Thanks.
Nate.
Good morning. Nate Wold with the Montana State Library.
Who did I miss? Anybody hasn't had a chance to introduce themselves?
We have a Michael Kruger. Did he introduce?
He did, yep, with Make It.
And Alan did introduce himself via, Alan Armstrong introduced himself via the chat. He says he must be muted.
Then Connolly was on.
Jenny, yes, are you still with us?
I am. Jenny Conley, past president of Major.
Thanks for being here, Jenny. Did I miss
Hey,
anybody?
Jenny, can you hear me now?
Yes. Hey, Alan.
Oh, sweet. God, it's about 15 mutes I got to hit through. Anyhow, Alan Armstrong here with the Bureau of Land Management in Billings, Montana, representing the Department of Interior.
Glad you could be with us, Alan. Thanks.
Thank you.
Anybody else that I missed? All right. We're going to skip over a couple of our action items this week. We've had some staffing changes, and so we weren't prepared to take action on the executive summary or the representative for MAGIP. So I just wanted to let you know that we won't be having those two action items at this meeting. We'll have those prepared for your November meeting. Are there any other updates or changes to the agenda?
Can someone confirm that you can see my screen, please? I am sharing the agenda now.
Yep, I see it.
Thank you.
Yep, see it very
Yes.
clearly, yes.
We've had no activity with our grant review subcommittee, so we don't have a standing report from them. And we're gonna spend some time later in the meeting in more of a work session talking about the FY22 land plan. So we'll talk more about that later in the agenda. So Michael, again, welcome and thank you for giving the MAGIP report.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Yeah, so we had our weekly meeting, our board meeting, or I'm sorry, not weekly, our monthly board meeting yesterday. You know, just went through our general committee reports. We do have a planned retreat or a strategic planning session coming up on September 28th. We've moved that to a virtual environment for obvious reasons with the pandemic. You know, we've typically done that in the past in person and would have liked to do that, but we'll be moving that to a completely virtual setting. That's from 9 to 4 on Monday, September 28th. Or we're going to be evaluating, you know, several things in relation to MAGIP, but one of the big items will be, you know, looking at the conference and how we're going to, the Big Sky GeoCon conference and how we're going to be approaching that this coming spring, you know, with the situation again that we're in. You know, right now we do have a contract in place with the Holiday Inn still in Missoula to have a on-premise conference. So our plan is right now is to move forward with a kind of a hybrid approach where we'd have virtual options as well as the in-person, you know, depending on how conditions progress. You know, we're definitely going to keep an eye on that and want to make sure that we're safe and provide a good environment for our attendees. And if that means it's a completely virtual conference, then that's what we're going to be prepared to do, as opposed to last year, as I'm sure many of you know that we had to cancel. And then on a related note to that, Jeff Hedstrom has kind of been leading an initiative to kind of have a mini conference of sorts in October. That would be a completely virtual conference. He's been working with Esri to get some of their solution engineers to do presentations there. He's also been reaching out to folks in the state, the DNRC, other entities to present. And I know that, you know, he wanted to try to work with this council too if there were certain items that you guys wanted to see as a part of that conference. You know, we're of course looking at COVID related recovery dashboards, some of the new tools that Esri has out there with Experience Builder and some of the other web-based tools, field mobility, things like that. So, you know, I'm not familiar with the framework of these meetings, but if you guys have specific items that you think would be good to have as a part of that virtual conference we're having, or virtual presentations we're going to be having in October, please please let me know, because we'd love to collaborate in any way we can to incorporate material that you all would like to see in that. We've been, otherwise moving forward with our new administrator. We've gotten full scope, more plugged in with our organization, trying to be more responsive on the email front, and then also trying to just grow how we're engaging our membership. Making sure they're seeing benefit to be a part of our organization. Again, items that we'll be discussing in more detail at the strategic planning session on the 28th as well. And the only other item is that MLIAC rep position, and I can't remember, Jenny, if you said that that's kind of being tabled till November, but still definitely want to see if there's a potential representation member that you guys would have in mind. And then also taking into account, I know Jenny Connolly spoke a little bit at the last council meeting about making sure that we are in line with what you guys see for that representation, whether that's a voting member. We're definitely open to making that happen. So whatever you guys want to see as a part of that member, I would love to discuss that and work on if it's a bylaw adjustment, I think that's something that we can do, or if it's just as it is, the way they came through earlier this year, that's fine too. So if there's any discussion you guys want to have on that front, please let me know.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate it. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
I did say we would take action on that item in November.
Sounds good.
Any feedback for Michael? I'm glad to hear about the online conference option. That sounds great.
Yeah, I was just curious. I know Indiana's conference, I was working with some of my representatives or my colleagues with NISJIC, and they're having their conference the week after next. And then I've seen that the MAGIC conference, I do believe, is online, and the Northwest GIS conference is online. Are any states having them in person?
Not that I've seen. I'm sure you guys have all seen the Esri conferences are all online. I do know of some organizations in the state here that are still having in-person conferences. Mecca is having an in-person conference actually next week. So there are some, but I think it's pretty low, at least in this environment. It's hard to say. I'm going to be very curious to see how things go as we move into 2021, though.
Yeah.
This is Brian Soliday. So, they had the virtual UGIC, which is the Utah, and so that was virtual. And then coming up in October is GIS in the Rockies, which is going to be virtual, as is the AGIC event in Arizona. So I don't know of anybody, in the Rocky Mountain region that is doing it in person, any state level GIS conferences.
Any other questions or feedback for Michael?
Michael, I'll reach out to you. I think it'd be good. It'd be a good time to have a grant writing workshop, or at least just an MLI grant discussion, to talk about the grant program and remind folks of that. I know it's not technical, extremely technical in nature, but the timing kind of fits beautifully. So I can reach out and we can discuss that further.
That sounds great.
All right. Again, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Erin, you want to continue with your report?
Yes, I'm gonna keep it pretty light today. I am trying to manage multiple screens right now, so give me just 1 second. I'm gonna pull up a chat. Okay, so we've been doing some standard reporting, the basic PDF reports in the past, and you probably have seen this MLIA dashboards draft in the past, and it was basically introduced to the council this past November, and we've picked it back up and continued working on it, and we'll continue to make this well, we hope to have this available and ready to go as a final product by the next meeting in November. And so some of the things I wanted to talk to you about today were the numbers that have come in for the fiscal year 2020. So in the top right corner, this is kind of outstanding. MLIA collections hit $1 million, and we have not seen that since I do believe it was 2008. We're starting to look into the reasons why. Some of the things that I know about are the I guess influx of people due to COVID, and then the low interest rates and refinancing homes. And so I have not verified that. Those are just some of the things that I know of that have been going on here in the state. And I will probably reach out to either the Department of Revenue or Commerce, the economists we've worked with in the past, to help try to understand that. I don't know if this will persist over time, but you can see in the bottom right corner, the collections by year has significantly increased from 2019. So it's pretty great. I don't know, like I said, if this will persist. We have had the study done by the DOR economist, and he had suggested trying to put out a 5-year projection. That's something we will be working on as a part of this dashboard report, but I just wanted to share that with everyone. I think it's pretty, I mean, I was pretty shocked actually, and I think Jenny and Evan were as well when I shared the final numbers. Actually, the numbers are still coming in, so it probably could increase more. It won't go drastically higher than what's been currently reported. But just wanted to share that. I guess I'll if anybody has any questions, I'll let you.
I've got a quick question, and probably can you hear me, Erin?
Yeah.
Yep.
Probably asked this last time we looked at this, but the collections are specifically coming from counties.
Yes.
And that's through taxes, or you know, where are they coming from?
Okay, I can go over that for those of you that are new to
Thank
the
you.
call, yeah, or just need a refresher. So basically, it's a county recordation fee, and we'll go into that a little later with the legislative update that Jenny is going to get into. But it was set, I think almost 15 years ago, and in 2005. And basically, there is a recordation fee that is assessed. And we are part of a larger fee, but $1 is right now currently slated to come to or to go towards land information efforts. So
a dollar per recordation.
Well, hold on. $1. There's $1 per page per recordation.
Gotcha.
So basically, we get 75 cents of that dollar, and a quarter of it goes to local government for the uses of land information. So each county government, I should say county government, each county government has a land information account, and some of the local governments can attest to how they use that. I can tell you that in certain counties such as Webo, Prairie, you know, counties that have not a lot of activity going on, have a small population, they don't see very high numbers to do much of anything with, maybe pay maintenance or purchase software annually. But the 75 cents that comes back to state government is put into the Montana Land Information account, and this is what that account monitors. We haven't taken into account the local piece of the Land Information Act. We could do that calculation if that's something that the council would like to see. but I hope that answers the question. So
It does, yeah,
yeah,
thanks. I thought I remembered something like that, and yeah, I'm relatively new to
sure, yeah.
the council still, so I'm still trying to understand funding. But the second question I have real quick is the map on the left side of the dashboard, the colors. I'm assuming the green are the highest. Oh, okay, there you go. Okay.
Yeah, so that's the total collections right now. And this was like I said, this is a draft, but I can get into the functionality a little more. Let me take one step back on what a recorded document is. One of the major recorded documents here in Lewis and Clark County, and I know that because I've been working with the clerk and recorder here. One of the most popular things that is seen is either a home purchase or a refinance, and so they're at the end of a purchase, you go through all those recorded documents to change ownership. But anybody could really record anything. If you had a strong statement about something and you wanted to go on the official record, you could do that. And so on the left, basically the map, it is interactive, and it shows all collections for the life. Well, I don't think we've included this year's. So it's just for each fiscal year. And basically, if you click on a county, you're going to get more information from each individual year for collection. So you can see that in Flathead County, the total collected has been 1.3 million. Again, this does not go to the county. This is the MLIA funds collected that come back to the state fund. And you can see that, since 2008, there hasn't been such a high collection for the county. And then if you scroll down, and I apologize for those of you that do not have a screen in front of you, but if you scroll down, there's also another graph that shows the collection over the life of basically the act. So there's that functionality. And then, like I said, we're still working on some of these things. I'm not sure if this indicator is important with the number of counties with collections less than 5,000, but we have that for 2020, 2019, and then we have a 5-year average.
Excuse me, Erin, just a quick question. This is Janet. Is there a reason why there's that sharp, did you say, and I missed it, the sharp increase in the collections this last year?
So I haven't confirmed it with the economists yet, but just from my own knowledge, there has been, from the work I've done with the State Emergency Coordination Center, there's been an increase in people coming to Montana, leaving areas because of COVID, purchasing houses. I don't know if you've seen that in your communities. It's been happening a lot here.
Yes.
And then also the other thing is the low interest rates and the refinancing of houses. And so we believe that has something to do with it. I don't think we have it here. I'll highlight, yeah, here we go. If we highlight the 2020 collections by month, it's the bottom right and it's the second tab. You can see that we were probably going along pretty steady, and then the spike in collections came at the end of the year, and I think that correlates with a lot of the with the housing. But again, I'd have to confirm that, and so that's something that we are starting to work on.
Yeah, and that's really an interesting indicator, because we've been hearing stories about this anecdotally, that's occurring. And if that is indeed driving this up, that would be very an interesting piece of information. Thank you.
Yeah.
If you can see that, Frank noted that August was the highest residential addressing month in Gallatin County since 2006. So about the time.
Highest rated what, Jenny?
Highest residential addressing.
Yes, in August of this year, we issued 105 addresses for residential units, which is the highest value that we've had since September of 2006 for a monthly total.
I've got another quick follow-up question. This is Dan. On the fee, Does anybody remember why it applies to recorded documents only and not filed documents?
Aaron, you're muted.
Thank you. I would say that no, I don't. Not off the top of my head because it was created back in 2005. But Catherine or Ken or Jenny, if you know, you guys were. I don't know if you were part of the working group, but you've been a part of the community for a while. So I don't know if you guys have any knowledge of why it was done that way.
I would say that it's either a set fee or no fee for filed documents. It's not a per page fee like what recorded documents are.
Yeah, it's like I just from a land surveyor's perspective, our plats and our certificates are filed, not recorded. And just kind of thinking out loud here, I know that there's not a portion of that fee. There is a per page fee, but it's really inexpensive. It's like, second page is 50 cents or something like that. Anyhow, it's just interesting to me because, boy, as far as land information, it seems like the file documents probably contain, a lot of land information. But anyway, yeah, just curious.
Dan, I do know that there is existing statute for recordation fees in addition to the MLIA fee, and so it's a way to just add a fee to existing statute.
Gotcha. Thank you.
This is Ken. I don't remember exactly, but I know that John Sasso carried that bill, I believe. It's too bad he's not on today because he may remember the politics at the time, but.
Yeah. Aaron, you're muted again.
On mute again. So if there's anything particular that you would like to see, I'll send out this as a draft. Please give comment now if you'd like. One thing we are talking about doing is overlaying the past 5 years by month in the bottom right corner. So right now we have 2020 separated out and 2019 separated out. Please let me know. We've got Nate on the phone. Nate's the one who's helping me work on this, and we can take those comments back and see if we can work on it. Get that ready for the November meeting.
The only other point I wanted to make about the dashboard is that total collections as a point in time metric doesn't necessarily align with the actual cash in our land information account. There's often some lag behind from when the collections occur, the county with Department of Revenue, and when those funds are transferred to the MLIA account. I think it's important for the council to see those dollars reflected in the counties where that funding is collected. And so I think collections reported in this way is helpful for the council. But in case there's points in time where you see a little discrepancy between actual cash and the dollar amounts collected, that's likely the reason why. And so as we're finalizing the dashboard, we'll consider how best to reflect that kind of differing information.
Thank you. And then I've got to sign in, apologize. The second dashboard I wanted to share with the group is the MLIA grants dashboard, and this is brand new. And so we are still in the phases of working this out, but I wanted to give a little more information on the grants, and so you could explore past years and how the different entities that have received grants over time. So basically right now, we've got these indicators in the kind of like left middle side of the screen that's showing the amount of grants that have been awarded over time, cities and the amount of grants that have been awarded to cities and towns, states and universities, reservations, should be tribes there, but we'll work on updating that, counties, and then special districts. And then on the left-hand side, you can choose the sector and choose the grantee, and that all the information should be should change on the dashboard. So I can choose counties, and it will only display the counties that have been awarded grants. And if you click on one of the counties or any of the geography, you can page through those to see when the county received the grant, and very basic information about the grant. Basically, how much was granted, what was underspent, and the name of the grant. So we're working on this. We're working on basically, I would say, standardizing our data, because right now it's all stored in spreadsheets over time. And so I think you've seen perhaps some animations that Stu had made. Well, some of you probably have in the past when it came to grants and the collections. And so we're just kind of taking it that next step and putting it into a dashboard so you can interact with, I guess, the business side of the Montana Land Information Act. So any questions about this or anything in particular that you would like to see on a grants type of dashboard?
I think it might be nice for the council to see a grants by type. So for example, all the PLSS grants, the 911 grants, some of those kinds of where we can identify consistent categories of grants, understanding that there's likely outliers that might have to be grouped in their own category, kind of an other.
This is Ken Wall. Can I make a quick comment?
Please.
Erin, it would be, one idea too would be to combine the reporting that I know it's kind of, I know you're working on formats for that with the grantees, but the more it can be automated, this is a great dashboard, by the way, I really like it. The more it can be automated so that, if it's fed from GIS tables, from Survey 123 reports, something like that, instead of from spreadsheets, it would be a lot easier to maintain and be up to date.
That's a good idea. So one thing that I will talk about, I guess, since it's a good time, is that we are currently implementing a new grant management system called Amplifund. The state went with a new one this past winter or spring, and we're getting all the current grant recipients, the new ones for FY 2021 into the system. And so there might be a way for us to pull out through an API to kind of integrate with what they have. But also I think we've got some really great examples of some final reports, and we could certainly publish those through this as well.
I've got a quick, this is Dan, I've got a quick thought, just kind of following up on Jenny's comment, is I just was looking through the land information plan, and, it specifically kind of identifies the spatial data infrastructure framework that we're going for. And I just think that would be useful, maybe even more useful than who is being awarded the grants, as opposed to what the topic of the grant is. Just so we could quickly see how we're doing on following the information plan, and as far as these grants, helping out with that, rather than the recipients. Just a thought.
So you would like to see more information on how it aligns to the land plan? Is that?
Yeah, you know, the end result of the grants, right? It is that things are added into the infrastructure framework. You know, that's the goal anyway. So it would be, you know, like Jenny was saying, it'd be nice to have a dashboard function that says, you know, number of, you know, let's just say, you know, city infrastructure grants awarded, or, you know, have those categories on the dashboard, USPLSS, you know, GCDB, things like that, and because those are identified in our land plan as well. So it kind of ties the two stats together. Does that capture what I'm trying to say?
Yeah,
I think that's a great plan. Excellent. I think from that we could discern how we're leveraging our dollars against the spatial data infrastructure and the priorities of the land plan, and where there may be gaps.
Yeah, there you go.
Yep, good.
Fantastic. Any other comments or questions?
Looks great, Erin.
Thank you.
And Jessica, I know Jessica's not on, but I think she's hoping to.
Caroline actually was working on this one. Okay. I guess I just wanted to give a brief update of some of the imagery work that we've been doing. So the 2019 imagery had gaps in it, and so you've probably seen the little press release. I don't know if you call it a press release, but the announcement we made when we found out about the the areas that weren't flowed due to smoke and the early snowfall last year. From what I've heard, that the gaps were flown in 2020, and most, if not all, has been completed. We have not received it yet. And then in addition to the 2019 NAEP having gaps in it, the 2017 NAEP had gaps in it as well. And we are working on getting those layers completed and published. We do have the data that was flown to complete the 2017 imagery, the NAEP imagery. And we didn't have the resources to get that completed in the imagery service. I know that a lot of folks have been wanting to see that completed. So we are working with Esri and our managed services team to get that up, and the 2018 flight merged in with 2017, and then of course the 2019 flight integrated as well. And I don't know if we have an exact timeline on that, but Troy is one of the ones taking the lead on that project. I don't know if you want to give any feedback, but hopefully we'll have those products out by the end of the year.
Erin, this is Catherine Maynard. Yes, we received notice yesterday that all of the gap flights have been completed for the 2019. So those are being processed right now. We probably won't be able to expect delivery of those for at least 2 months. So hopefully before the end of the calendar year, we'll get those, and then they'll get integrated into the previous data sets for those counties that had missing data. We also had a few glitches with tiles that were missing kind of randomly in a few of the counties and along the border. And so our NAEP coordinator has been working with APFO to get those provided to us. And just so everyone knows how this works, for the NAEP program, the aerial photography program of APFO, of USDA, handles the data collection and the contracting of the flights. And up until last year, the NRCS geospatial group coordinated really closely with APFO, and we received copies of the data at the same time that they were immediately QC'd by APFO. And that relationship has changed. There's been a lot of changes with the servers, and a lot of that has to do with at the highest levels of the federal government decisions to provide that NAEP data in-house. And so all like Forest Service clients and NRCS clients, other federal agencies in the Department of Agriculture have their own servers and have that data already available to them pretty much simultaneously once it's QC'd. So serving outside clients is not the priority that it once was. And we still have an agreement to allow us to provide the data to the library. And some of you might, who actually use the NAEP data, might know that one of the services that we provide through the library is that the county mosaics generated by APFO, because of the size of the data sets, use compression routines that the end product is of lesser visual quality. And it also, the county mosaics are only 3-band, the visible portions of the spectrum. The processes that we use at the library are higher, are different compression and allow for higher resolution. And also our county mosaics are then the 4-band. So the color IR is not separated out. It's much more convenient for the users. But that said, we have members of the MSL staff that work diligently with us to get that processing done. And this past year, part of the problem of getting it out sooner has been the delivery from APFO to NRCS. And then as soon as the NRCS gets it, I get a copy. But there's some, as I said, issues at the highest levels of moving of servers. Of course, the COVID situation has made things challenging because they were just starting server migration processing right before COVID. So things got a little bit backlogged. It is exciting to hear that the flights got completed before the smoke and the snow. So we should have, that data should be fairly high quality, and we'll get that filled in as soon as we can.
Catherine, I have a quick question for you. This is Dan. And this is probably a dumb question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Does NAEP stand for National Agricultural Insurance Program?
No, it stands for the National Agricultural Imagery Program.
Imagery. Okay. All right. Thank you.
It has nothing to do with insurance. The NAEP program, it was initiated for originally for the purposes of people, farmers and ranchers, private landowners that participate in agricultural programs sponsored by NRCS and paid for by FSA. So way back when, the idea was that they needed to have high resolution aerial photography to evaluate what those farmers and ranchers were doing and make sure that they were doing what they said they did with our taxpayer dollars. The NAEP program then expanded to be comprehensive. And so that's what we have today.
Thank you.
And you can see the screen, and I also dropped the chat. I'm dropping the link to this document in the chat window, but this is the announcement that went out about the 2019 NAEP. So you can see the areas that were not flown because of snow and smoke. And so those are the areas that have been collected. And so we will work on, when we do receive them, we will work on getting those integrated into the our web services. But what we're doing right now is, if we pulled up the 20, we don't have this announcement for 2017, but the map is a little similar. You would see gaps. We're working on filling in the gaps for the 2017 imagery, and then also publishing the 2019 imagery through web services. Upon the receipt of those, the data that is going to be filled in for 2020, we'll work on getting those published as well. Any questions there? Okay. Another thing that I wanted to talk to you about, and we've talked about this, I do believe, in the past, but we haven't had a disaster in a while that qualified for the free imagery that is flown by the JIC. It's the geospatial insurance, I think. Hold on, let me pull it up right now. I'm pulling up.
It's the I think it's the Geospatial Intelligence Agency, Aaron.
Intelligence Center. Thank you. Yeah. Oh no, Insurance Consortium. It's Geospatial Insurance Consortium. So basically, there are these two programs. You may have recognized the terms Blue Sky, Gray Sky. So Blue Sky is an actual imagery program that you could participate in and purchase from the company that flies the imagery. But the Gray Sky program basically makes imagery available during some sort of natural disaster. And I did explore this. So take one step back. We found out about this program from Richard Buckwright, who was the former DES coordinator for the state of Florida when the Hurricane Harvey, and I cannot remember the other hurricane name that year, had hit Texas and Florida. And basically they were, they had planes in the air within days of the hurricane being hit, and they offered the imagery free to the state, and I do believe local governments as well. And so when the 2017 fires hit, I was working with them, but we never hit the threshold, which was, from what I had understood in the past, 100 structures damaged. And then I could get them to come up here and fly imagery over the areas impacted. So basically, Richard Buckwright, the former DES coordinator for Florida, he moved on to this company, this Geospatial Insurance Consortium, and he reached out to me late last week, and also has reached out to Gallatin County, and they did end up flying the Bridger fire. So I have imagery available only to local, tribal, state, and local, tribal, state, and I do believe federal government as well. And I'm working on, I've already reached out to Frank and then Frank's fire chief, I do believe, I can't remember his name. They have access to it right now. I'm gonna reach out to the city, and then DNRC knows that it's been collected. I've been working with Brian Collins to get them access to this, and then whomever else. And so it's for basically response and recovery. DES has also been made aware of the imagery. And so I wanted to make the council aware of the program, and all I have is an image from the, it's just a screenshot right now. I haven't been granted access yet, so I can't show you the imagery. We're working on getting that up and running, but I have the image of the area that was collected, and I'll throw that into the So it's not that great. And then Frank can speak a little more to the quality because he said that there was some issues with it, but it is for the purposes of recovery and response. So I wanted to let you know that that is available. In the time that there is any kind of natural disaster, Richard reached out to me first. And so we have that relationship already established, but you know, we can be sure to monitor the activities, work with the agencies or the federal agencies or state agencies or locals that are responding to an event and see where the threshold lies and work on getting imagery flown for the area. Unfortunately, I can't answer a ton of questions about this, about the program. We can ask for the organization to maybe come and give a brief presentation in the future if you're interested, maybe not during the current natural disasters that are going on, but we certainly could have them speak.
Aaron, do you know if Richard's talking at the NISJIC virtual conference next week?
Richard is now the head of the CLC, so I know he'll be there. I don't know how much he's going to be busy because of the response to the hurricanes and now the hurricanes and the fires. So I'd have to check the agenda. I'm sure he'll try to be around if he can.
Hey, Aaron, this is Gordy. I might follow up with you later. We'd probably be interested in some of that imagery. We need to follow up with property owners on any property loss and damages.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking this could be helpful. I know we've got some of our folks in the field looking at different sources now, so I might contact you later.
Absolutely. And so if you are interested, just reach out to me and let me know.
Gordy, they do use Vexel imaging, so it does have oblique. Probably would be very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Right, because we're trying to proactively help people identify the loss. There's a whole, a process that they can go through and apply for it. But if we can have anything to help them, that helps a lot.
So it's from what I had initially heard, it's kind of like an unbelievable thing. Does it seem real? And that was the one. The one thing that the DES coordinator, the GIS coordinators from Florida and Texas had said that they, it was kind of unbelievable, but it was extremely helpful in the disaster response, the initial response, and I'm assuming recovery, but we've only heard about the response part of it. So I will, it's been a while since the imagery working group has had any kind of meetings, but I'll make sure that I reach out to the MSDI imagery working group so they know that this is available, and then, just the other avenues in the state. Okay. That is it. Does anyone else have any questions for me?
Questions for Aaron? Hearing none, we'll move on to Troy with an elevation update.
All right. Okay. So at the last meeting, I provided, I believe I demoed the beta development version of the LiDAR web application. I think, Aaron, you had that in the meeting notes, the link to that, if folks wanted to revisit that. I thought what would be helpful today would be to provide an update just on the use of that application. So the application went live in mid-July, so a few weeks after our last meeting. And we have a data use survey that's part of that application, so we're collecting information on how the LiDAR data is being used. So over the last 2 months, we've received 111 of those use surveys. So I thought it'd be helpful to provide some of those numbers so just you all have an idea of how the data is being used. So 25% of those surveys that have come in are using the app to view data. I've been pleased to see that because it means we're possibly reaching an audience that otherwise wouldn't be able to take advantage of the LiDAR data, so they wouldn't have the software or something like that. So people are able to just come into the app and view the LiDAR-derived products right there on the web app. 35% are using the application to download data. So obviously anyone that's able to download the data, that's staff time that we don't have to put into filling that request ourselves. So the user can help themselves. And then that remaining 40%, they're doing both. So people in there viewing the data as well as downloading data. So far, we've reached all sectors, all business sectors. We've seen requests from the public, private, nonprofit, state, federal, local. So that's really good to see. Just a breakdown of those numbers, roughly 40% of the users are private consulting firms. That's expected. So this is kind of professional data that you need some expertise to use. But we've also seen a pretty good bump in general public use. So we're seeing 23% of the folks that are using the application are the general public. So we're reaching folks that otherwise couldn't use this data. And then 18% has been state government. So I think that's an important note for this group, that we are seeing good use from state agencies. And I'll bring that back up a little bit later because we're really looking for some state partners to join us on these future LiDAR acquisitions. So that's the LiDAR application, and I wanted to provide a brief update on the active collections that are going on right now. And by active, I mean basically the planes are in the air right now collecting LiDAR. So this is from our BAA, our USGS 3D elevation essentially award from fall of last year. So that data is being collected right now. So far, there's been about 4,000 square miles collected. Sanders County is complete, and then the west half of Glacier County, including parts of Glacier National Park. Remaining on that award, we've got the northwest half of Fergus County, and then the 3 reservations across the High Line. We've got the Blackfeet Indian Reservation, Fort Belknap Reservation, and Fort Peck Reservation, and then also Richland County. So we expect those to continue to be collected this fall until the snow falls, and then it'll be picked up again next spring after the snow melts. We also had another county fall into our lap. Yellowstone National Park was being collected, and so the USGS is also going to pick up Park County in its entirety. That acquisition is also ongoing right now. For all this data, we're looking at late winter, early spring 2022 before that's delivered. It's an important note. So there's a significant turnaround time. We're looking at 18 months or more before we get this data. So that's something to keep in mind with any of the planning that we're doing. We're not so much looking at projects that need the data now. We're trying to think ahead and what do we need in 18 months to 2 years. Obviously, that's an obvious challenge for us. So that's active LiDAR projects that are going on right now. I also want to talk about future collections. So the USGS will make their announcement for their 3D elevation program any day now. It was expected by now, but we should hear soon. And once that announcement is made, we'll be looking at pulling our application together in October and submitting that in late October to early November. Obviously for that, we need partners. We're looking for funding partners that can bring in some money towards LiDAR acquisitions. We did have a working group meeting in late July to begin planning for where should we be collecting LiDAR next. Coming out of that meeting, we had kind of 2 top priority counties where there was a lot of mutual interest amongst a number of the members involved with the working group. And those 2 counties are Flathead County and Gallatin County. I'm feeling pretty good about those 2, that those are going to be the two main ones that we go after next. So again, Flathead County and Gallatin County. I'm looking for any contacts in those counties, people we should reach out to, potential funding partners that I should talk to. And then building on those 2 counties, based on what other partners we're able to find, we'll start to looking at any adjacent counties, or any other large contiguous areas. So if we've got interest in Madison County or maybe Lake County, we'd be looking to try to expand to those areas, you know, if we can bring in enough partner funding. Probably within the next few weeks. I'm kind of waiting for the award announcement to go out, but as soon as we receive that, I'm going to try to pull together all the potential funding partners for another meeting and really start to discuss what kind of funding might be available to really figure out what we're going to be able to apply for. I've got a couple partners that I'm really confident in. They have the money. We're good to go, essentially. That's NRCS, being led by Catherine. They've continued to be a really great partner for LIDAR. And then Glacier National Park has reached out to me. They have a little bit of funding that they can provide as well. Also have a couple of leads that we're working. Rob All has been talking with the Forest Service and his folks about possibly joining on a LIDAR application. And then we've recently also heard from the Bureau of Land Management, talking with them about potentially joining us as funding partners. We'd also like to continue to fill out the Highline and the reservations up there. So we're reaching out to Rocky Boy Reservation to see if we can get them to join on. They were great. The other reservations across the Highline were great partners this past year. As always, if you hear about LIDAR collections going on or coming up, let Aaron or I know. Talk with your agencies and think about possibly becoming a funding partner and joining us. Any contacts there, send them to Aaron or I. We'd be happy to reach out to them. I think that's all I had. I'm glad to answer questions.
Thanks, Troy. Questions for Troy? It's great to see all the interest and use.
Yeah, so that last working group meeting, I was really pleased with the participation and how it continues to increase. I think we had 40 plus people in that meeting, so it's really continuing to grow.
Yeah, and I would just like to reiterate that the more partners we find, the more we take advantage of these federal funds that are being made available for statewide LIDAR collection, and so even if your agency or the group that you represent might not be ready to partner this year, consider it for future years, but also consider the timeline. It's not something that is a fast turnaround, and we will be reaching out to state agencies and locals and other folks to try to find as many as many partners as we can moving forward.
Yeah, and I mentioned that looking at the data use surveys, we've been seeing pretty good use from state agencies. I would really like to have a state agency join us on one of these BAA applications. I think it'd be really great to have some state representation on that.
I don't know if, I was just having the same thought, Troy. This is Dan. I don't know if Mr. Boselman is on this call or not, but has anyone reached out to MDT? And I guess I've got two questions. That would be the first. And then is there a technical area where people can understand what the data kind of should and shouldn't be used for? For instance, if you're, transportation design, if you're designing a highway based upon the model that the LIDAR information could show, versus if you're designing a bridge, there's two separate requirements in the quality of the data. So I guess I just was wondering if there's a technical section here that people could read about the national standards that are being followed for the data collection, maybe. And then the second, has anyone reached out to MDT?
Yeah, so I don't have that information on the story map that Aaron is sharing there. That's where that information will go. I don't have it out there yet. I know it needs to be there. I know that's really great information that everyone's looking for. So we'll be adding that to the story map at some point. And then also, I encourage people to give me a call or reach out to me. I can help talk through some of that. A lot of this is more about really understanding the project and what the data might be used for in order to determine if it's good enough for that. So a lot of it's just about trying to talk through that, and I'm happy to talk with people about that. And then in regards to your first question about Department of Transportation, Aaron, do you want to, I know you've talked a bit with them, if you want to.
Yeah. We certainly have been in contact with the Department of Transportation, and I was just pinging Mike in the chat as well. Mike, I don't know if you're unmuted right now, but it's something we've been working with them on, and hopefully moving forward, it could be a partnership. One benefit that did happen recently was an engineer had contacted us knowing where the area was being collected, an engineer with the Department of Transportation, and basically said, hey, we're working in this area, can you grab this extra area? And we were actually able to get that negotiated into the current collection that's being done just by having someone reach out to us and say, we need this for a certain project. And we're working to document that so then we can bring it back to the MDT leadership.
So I was just going to ask Troy a question. I don't know if our engineering folks were represented at the July meeting. I know they were invited. Did they participate?
They were,
okay,
yes.
good.
We did have several folks from DOT, and they did express interest in being able to partner. They said it's pretty difficult to try to identify like areas of interest to submit to us, just because they're, the roads are squiggly throughout the county. So really identifying what area they want is a bit difficult, but yeah, there was representation from.
Okay, good. And I can help facilitate some of that. I also know there's some potential of outfitting the vans that we use to collect regular imagery for all of our highways with LiDAR, and I don't know how that would contribute to any of this, but there's a secondary aspect of what's going on with the different business unit in MDT. So we should probably have another conversation and get Aaron in the loop.
Okay.
I just wanted to chime in as well in response to Dan's comments. Troy and I were talking the other day that it would be really interesting to know what engineering applications can be supported with the LiDAR data that we have available. I know in the Forest Service, we have a lot of the people who use the data or would like to use the data are in the engineering branches. And there are always questions as to, well, do we spend the extra money to upgrade to quality level 1, or is quality level 2 sufficient? So, getting a little bit more feedback on what you're able to do with the different products, I think would be really helpful.
Troy, do we have a case study? Do we have a one-pager for engineers yet?
No, I don't think we specifically targeted engineers. I know we did one related to transportation and then one for natural resources, but I don't believe we went after like the survey engineering community.
We certainly could work on that. Dan, if you'd be willing to help with that, that'd be great.
Yeah, I was just going to chime in and say it'd be nice if it could target the technical professional community in general, not land surveyors and engineers and anybody else who, whether they're working in state government or outside of state government, working on state contracts or federal contracts. It would just be a really good resource to when you're analyzing a project and the data collection that's going to be necessary to consider this data set. And I know that's becoming more common. An example, we're doing a sewer project for the city of Bozeman right now, and we spot check their LiDAR, in critical design areas, but for the most part, we found that And we continue to find that the Bozeman LiDAR data set is design ready, and you can design a lot of items upon it. So anyway, yeah, a one-pager kind of technical document would be real good to have for the technical design community.
Do you think it would be a good use of resources to develop one for engineers and one for surveyors, or do you think we could throw it all together?
I think you could clump all of your kind of technical designers into one category there.
All right, Dan, I'll reach out, and you and Troy and I can work together on that. If anybody else wants to volunteer that'd be great. Let me know.
All right.
Aaron, our NRCS engineers are big users of the LiDAR data, and we've been working on some in-house documentation geared towards the engineers. So there might be something that we're already working on or that has been prepared at the national level that we could contribute.
Great.
That's awesome. Great. Thanks, Catherine.
I made a plug there for funding partners, but I should also mention kind of the timing of that. So we'll be putting the application together in October. So by November 1, we would need like a good faith commitment. And then the actual agreement with USGS would need to be in place roughly early spring of next year. So that's the timing for the funding.
All right. Any other questions, comments for Troy? Great. Thanks, Troy.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And now we're going to talk about the transportation theme with Michael Fashaway. Michael, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Michael Fashaway. I'm the land information lead at the Montana State Library. So kind of work on a bunch of different layers, structures and addresses, oversee cadastral, administrative boundaries, and transportation. I hope most folks are aware, but if you're not, transportation has been kind of stagnant since the 2017 budget cuts. We just haven't had the resources to work on it. In the meantime, a number of things have kind of changed as far as transportation data goes, namely the kind of move towards next generation 911. Since most of the data sets that go into transportation framework are local government data sets that are largely developed for 911 purposes, we're seeing increased data moving towards next generation 911 type standards. So I think we last talked about this back in November at the November meeting. And there was a really good discussion about ways of moving forward and forming a work group or potentially using some MLA funds to work on a contract with someone to help move things along a little bit. So far, we haven't accomplished too much with it. I was hoping to be a little further along at this point in the year, but just due to COVID and other things, we haven't made as much progress on that as I'd like. We discussed this recently within the library in terms of our 2021 work plan, and kind of came up with a few next steps for it. So that's largely what I wanted to just update the council on. I'm hoping, I began a little bit of this work, but I started reloading some data sets into a new next generation 911 compliant schema with some additional attributes that are not part of the NG 911 standard, largely to help with base mapping and geocoding and things like that. And those I kind of consider our most immediate needs: next generation 911, updated roads for our base maps and things, and geocoding. It's one of the layers that feeds into our statewide geocoding service. So if there isn't an actual address point, the road centerline data set is the next data set that's used. So it's pretty important for that as well. Going forward, short term, I'd like to resume and continue reloading local data sets and build out a new statewide data set built on the most current local government data. And again, that would kind of help meet some of those immediate needs that we see. Looking a little bit longer term, there's a strategic planning process that I think is going to begin here sometime pretty soon. We're thinking of leveraging that process to help with defining the longer term framework needs and goals. You know, possibly collaboration with MDT, considering additional functionality beyond kind of the basic needs. We just got asked a question yesterday or today about a routable road network that has come up several times in the past. I don't hear a lot of people asking for it, but potentially going forward, maybe that is something that we would find as a basic need for the framework. So kind of likely in collaboration, but I don't know exactly how the strategic planning process will go on, but we'll be looking to form a work group to kind of help work on that, kind of setting the longer term needs and vision behind or for the framework. That is my kind of quick summary of where things stand. So if there's questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Any questions for Michael?
Now, this is Mike Bosleman, not really a question, but I think we're in a better position to help support improvements to the transportation layer. We finally upgraded a legacy linear referencing system, and it's a modern version. It's an Esri Roads and Highways product. So some of the things you talked about with regard to a routable road network and other, I guess, data sharing capabilities are going to be much easier for us in our current environment. So it's a good time to start having these conversations, Michael.
Okay, yeah, no, that's good to hear.
And I'll share with you, Mike, and I was going to include you in on the conversation too. It was HHS that's looking for a routable network. And so I just got the notification that they were, and I've reached out to them. I let them know we're in the process of developing the land information plan and that they should approach the council and Michael and myself, and let's talk about what their needs are and future needs. It's obviously it's not going to be anything immediate. And then also I think that I think I saw Brian Anderson on the line today, but I think there's a section that's looking for a routable network in MDT now as well. And so if it's something where we can partner with multiple state agencies to, or at least collaborate or coordinate so that we can get a more affordable price for agencies that might need a routable network, it's definitely something I'm interested in trying to help with, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
Sounds good. Thanks, Aaron.
Are there questions or comments?
I guess. Oh, go ahead.
This is Ken Wall. I was just going to make a brief comment on this. It's great to see some work and energy going into this. Without getting into the weeds a lot, in terms of the routable network versus next gen 911 needs, it is. I mean, the main focus of next gen 911 is routing the calls to the correct public service answering point or county essentially, or tribal entity, the 911 center essentially for each area. But every local government has major needs with their computer-aided dispatch to deal with eventually routable networks as well. But it would be good to, within the next gen framework, the road name itself, the actual name of the road is of course parsed out and is not, I mean, there's an alias table for different names, what different people call those. And I know there's a lot of difference between for instance, an MDT type of a naming scheme in some cases and a local government naming scheme, but it'd be good to coordinate on that so that those alias tables are at least populated with all the versions of what a road is called, even though that doesn't directly affect routing the call within the internal schema that the 911 uses. But the other thing I wanted to mention is there's a lot of non-addressed roads in Montana. And some of the most important of those are Forest Service, BLM, and tribal, you know, in addition to all the private roads. But with Forest Service and BLM, I know that, you know, both of them have, you know, robust GIS systems. And instead of every county, local government gathering that data in sort of a haphazard method or way, it would be really useful, I think, to put some effort into this coordination statewide, and possibly even address, I know other states are addressing, you know, Forest Service roads, for instance, and BLM by using, you know, number of address per mile, that sort of thing. I mean, basically, it's very helpful in rural states like Montana with very long driveways to have the non-address roads be a part of this process whenever possible. And sometimes that's not possible, say for a private road or a driveway. But certainly for those quote unquote public roads like BLM and Forest Service, if we had a consistent way to add those to each of the local governments coming from authoritative sources, it would be real beneficial in the long run. So this is more long-term planning issues, I think.
Dan, did you have a question or comment? Sorry, Aaron, didn't mean to interrupt.
That's okay.
Yeah, I had a comment just regarding the Esri routes software that the state's going to start using, and that's it. I think it would be wise for, you know, the DES agencies and then the DOT. You know, and this would just be pertinent to transportation improvement projects, not existing highways and byways, but on the improvement projects, the alignments are basically already located in a known coordinate system, and there's a set of drawings that's produced that are called as-builts. They're basically record drawings of the infrastructure. And especially since they're running Esri now, it's super easy to turn that into a data set in Esri based upon real coordinates and doesn't require any additional field data collection. So I'm just throwing that thought out there that I'm glad that MDT's kind of thinking through this and has you know, move forward with their non-legacy software, because I think that would really help in continuing to add to the data set, transportation data set.
Yeah, this is Mike, and there's plans for that down the road. Step one was to get a modern product in the door and stand it up with all the interfaces and that with existing applications. But we recognize there's a lot more potential that we have now for things, for example, as you just described. So yeah, more to come on that.
Awesome.
Sounds like a great opportunity for some more group discussion.
This is Dawn. Can I just have a more general transportation question? Sounds like you're really trying to move that towards next gen 911 and the needs there. Are you also ensuring that the current needs of our transportation layer are also being met with that schema, or is that what you're hoping that the working group can help identify? I just want to make sure that we can meet existing needs with the new product.
Yeah, certainly I would want to leverage that working group to make sure that, you know, we're not losing anything. Based on what I know as far as the transportation framework goes and its current uses, what I'm proposing to do and starting to work with wouldn't limit its use in any of those ways. And again, that's largely what I would consider, you know, base mapping, you know, kind of basic, you know, statewide road layer cartography and things, and geocoding. But certainly if there's something that falls outside of those kind of basic uses that I'm missing, please let me know.
Okay, thank you.
Michael, this is Brian Anderson.
Yeah.
I'm on my third try for my microphone. Evidently, I have lots of microphones attached. So, yeah, just to expand, Mike Balsman covered it pretty well, but we recently deployed our upgraded linear referencing system, and we're happy to participate and help any way we can. So I can definitely be a part of that. And to expand on what Dan was talking about, that is part of our future process to incorporate the plans of reconstruction. We've actually had an LRS, a spatial LRS, since I think 1999 for the entire state, but we've been managing it through the as-builts for quite some time, but the process is improving as we're going, for sure. So this, as Roads and Highways, provides a lot of opportunities for us. So happy to participate.
Great, thanks.
Any other discussion? All right, I just want to do a quick check on the agenda. We've got a few more updates to go through, and then we'll break for lunch and come back and discuss the land plan. In the meantime, if you need to take a comfort break, please feel free. So just planning your time for breaks during the meeting. And next up, we have Jessica Mitchell to give us a land cover update. Jessica, it's been really exciting to see your work group beginning to make progress.
Thanks, Jenny. As I mentioned before, I'm with the Spatial Analysis Lab, and we are leading up stewardship of the land cover layer. And I'll start out with bringing to your attention the land cover story map that's provided as a link on the meeting materials website. And then I've also pasted a copy of that link in the chat if you wanted to try to track some of the information here as I present updates.
All right, let me try to get this up and running. It's going to the screen I am not sharing. So if you give me just 1 second. Okay. I think it's there.
Thanks, Erin. We can move past that title slide. Okay. I think a good place to to begin with land cover is that we're in a position right now where we know we have a current product that's outdated. It's at the end of its life cycle, and we're in need of a comprehensive revision. So right now, the product that we're working with has a base map that's based on work we've done in Montana on a Northwest gap analysis project that goes back to 2009. This project was developed with Landsat imagery from 1999 to 2001, and we have continued to provide regular updates through 2017 to this base map. Updates include recent modifications or disturbances to landscape, transportation improvements as updates become available. We went through county by county with the cadastral information in 2017 to help break up development into levels of intensity. And then we have fire burn perimeters that are also updated through 2017. As part of recognizing the need for an update, another matter to consider is the framework itself, that we're in a position right now where we provide a static map, but there is a growing need to be able to assess change and trends over time. You can move on to the next slide, please. So here is just a screenshot. If you want additional details, there's a history and current status tab here that will provide a lot more information on how the land cover products have changed, evolved over time. So despite being outdated, we do know that the land cover data set continues to have increasingly wider use, particularly among folks who are downloading environmental summary reports through the Heritage Program Map Viewer. I double checked this number and we're off here in terms of our percent increase. So actually, if we want to look at number of downloads, we have 1,382 from fiscal year 17 to 18. 18 to 19, we were up to 1,509 downloads, and then last year, 2,041. So we're looking at an overall increase over those years of 68%. That 133% is incorrect. We also know that land cover, particularly at the mid-resolution and state scales, can support a large number of downstream business applications. Several are specific to Heritage Program. For example, the land cover stands up the field guide for biological communities. It also supports our ability to conduct ranking of habitats and then also ranking and status for individual plant and animal species. Among the calls I get about land cover, many are in the arena of hydrologic modeling, for example, floodplains. And there's a role that land cover plays also in providing coefficients in water balance and drought evapotranspiration models. Some other downstream or related applications include economic impact assessments, particularly at the state scale. And agencies may be interested in particular when it comes to updating resource management plans. Next slide, please. For our 2019-2020 priority in the Montana Land Information Plan, we had identified needing to develop and adopt a partnership-driven plan for creating and systematically updating a layer that ideally can integrate with other MSDI layers. In beginning this process, it became clear that we needed to be at minimum providing an interim land cover base map that is following the existing methods and taking advantage of new ecological systems mapping that's just came out under the Landfire GAP program for Montana. Next slide, please. So this is moved us in the direction of applying a similar workflow that we've developed for the current MSGI land cover to this new landfire remap, which is imagery based on 2016. And then going about trying to figure out a process for evaluating that product. And doing this with input and coordination from a land cover working group. Next slide, please. And again, if you're tracking, there's a tab here for working group information. You could move forward again. So our first land cover working group meeting convened at the end of March. We began with, as a group, trying to gain knowledge or an understanding of our current Montana spatial data infrastructure and its life cycle. We discussed land cover user needs. And then we also presented a series of products that were under evaluation. While our participant group tends to fluctuate from meeting to meeting, or a questionnaire for participants in terms of who is interested in being informed and who is interested in being engaged, I think indicates or is encouraging to see that there is a large number of participants who are interested in being engaged in this process. What came out of that first meeting, some comments that I've summarized here, is one for rangelands and invasive species. There's really a need to have more accurate mapping, some ability to determine what level of invasion, for example, we have on the ground. That resulted in the formation of a subgroup on rangeland and invasive species that met once and is scheduled to meet, being scheduled to meet toward the end of September. We heard again, need for time series and tracking ecological systems that have been altered. Across the board, we were seeing a range of user needs varying from higher resolution products to other agency representatives who were feeling like the current scale of land cover that we are providing is serving their needs. USGS input was along the lines of, for surveys they've conducted, they were finding that users were feeling that latency matters. So they would like to see updates on an annual basis. We addressed some of the challenges that might exist with trying to combine information across different scales. And then being able to best leverage a wealth of field data that we have. We've also had feedback that the story map is a helpful communication tool. And then the question came up on how do we plan to address downstream heritage program uses? Next slide, please. So in response to some of this input, the proposed land cover framework we've developed, if you look at the design we have on the left, this is our current framework where we've tried to organize land cover updates across years to facilitate any type of visualization of change over time. In a new framework, we see a land cover based on the landfire existing vegetation type product with its annual updates, as well as a layer that is providing some information on uncertainty or confidence. So if we look for a class in a specific location in the state, there should be also corresponding information to how confident we are in the accuracy of that part of the classification. We'd like to also provide several other landfire remap products, such as environmental site potential, biophysical settings. There's also vegetation height and vegetation cover. We'd like to see in this framework some sort of a temporal dimension where we can track trends over time. And this could be with products that are coming out from the USGS that have spectral land cover changes annually. This would be LC map products. And then also Landsat or Landsat Sentinel-2 harmonized vegetation indices. And then we'd also like to have flexibility to accommodate single theme products that might be developed. For example, invasive species mapping, detailed and specific project areas, woody encroachment theme, threat-based mapping that's occurring for greater sage grouse. Next slide, please. To date, we have put together a suite of land cover resources. One is we have out now a preliminary Montana land cover 2020 dataset for evaluation. It is available by download and also through the Ecological Site Reviewer. We've been working with NRCS to incorporate existing and preliminary 2020 land cover mapping, where we can invite users to evaluate these products and actually provide input through options such as polygons and photos. So this might be actually an avenue later for bringing in the field data or occurrence data we have throughout the state, which is a denser network than what's being used to map at the national scale. And if we're thinking in the longer term about citizen science, there's the opportunity for users to upload photos, which is very helpful too. We're also working with the NRCS on a time series platform right now. I would say the NRCS and library staff as well, building a Google Earth engine base that would support, as I mentioned before, some of these time series products that are available. If you're looking through the Montana Land Cover Story Map, this is another resource we're continuing to build and update frequently right now, and where we will be releasing a draft land cover plan by the end of the month. If you're interested in any of the meeting materials, we've set up a Cubes hub, and you can contact me for an invitation to access the presentation slides, the meeting notes, and so forth. The next slide, please. So in our next steps, I am working on finalizing a budget and timeline for our land cover plan and having this plan circulated. We expect to convene again as a working group late October, early November to hopefully come back to this committee in November for feedback on our plan and possibly a motion to adopt the plan. Longer term too, I'm hoping that this working group and meetings with the council present some ideas or a discussion on how to pursue external funding sources. To date, we have limited MLIAC funding. I need to check my numbers before I finalize any of this, but looking into historic funding levels, I think we had put in a request around 2008 and received most of that on the order of 160,000. Currently, we're on the order of about 5,000. We also receive support from partner contribution funds, and right now we have one-time seed money through the NRCS. So we've been able to continue to provide our traditional updates, to coordinate our working group meetings, write this land cover plan, and provide update and maintenance to web pages. But I really would like to pursue, especially the single theme products in partnership with agencies who have that interest, and bring really across the state some of the best available data that's out there, regardless of the resolution. There's a lot of great work that's going on. Irrigated lands would be an example. A lot of graduate student and PhD projects that have really dug into parcel level information that could feed in to higher levels of information with development are examples there. So that's where we stand, and any questions or comments are welcome.
Again, congratulations on your progress, Jessica. It's great to see this moving along in such a concrete way.
Thank you.
Questions or comments for Jessica?
Just thank you so much for your presentation. That was really interesting. Thank you.
This is Catherine. I'd just like to explain that the NRCS has been really excited about the progress that's being made. And our goal, and I'm sure it is similar to other agencies that have an interest in land cover, land use and land cover, is to have a product that is certainly more up to date and has a concept behind it that allows for improvements and updates. So we're really fortunate to have the expertise at the lab to work on this at this time. And it's been a long time coming, but I think it would be really helpful if, you know, for example, Dawn, the folks in your group that use the land cover data, to encourage them to participate in the working groups. That's where we'll really be making progress, by having more participants and input on what users see in the data itself. One of the tools that is available is for identifying where there are perhaps misclassified areas. So there's a lot of opportunity here for user input that was never available before. So really encourage all of you to reach out to your colleagues that use this data and have site-specific knowledge about it to pay attention and get involved in the working groups.
Thanks for that plug, Catherine. Other comments or questions for Jessica? All right. Thanks again, Jessica. And I think next up we have Mary Craigle from CEIC. Mary, this is an incredibly busy time for you, so thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
You're welcome, Jenny, and I apologize to the group for not having a formal presentation today for you guys, but yes, it has been a little bit busy. First of all, thank you to all of you, and a big giant thanks to Jenny Stapp for all the help from the libraries, and to Joanne Flick. We are doing everything we can with the 14 days at least remaining. I will let you know that there has been a bill introduced in the Senate to extend it yet another month. So we may not be done yet, but right now we're down to 14 days left to go on the census. Montana stands at only 85.3% of folks enumerated. We only, Alabama is below us right now in terms of enumeration. Senator Daines announced today that they're moving 250 enumerators to Montana. Senator Tester has been fearless in his requests and moving people around. I have 200 partners across the state working on this, but again, you guys have been a key element, and I'm excited to help with the It's Still Time to Count campaign. So just thought I'd give you a little update on the census. So that's kind of where we are. We'll see what the next chapter is. Regarding differential privacy, I wish I had some really great information, but I really don't. Interestingly, the Census Bureau has been not providing much information about what they are doing with differential privacy these days. They hosted a stakeholder meeting yesterday. I was not able to attend. That was by invitation only, but Bob Coates, who is the chair of our state data center network for the U.S. Census Bureau, was able to attend. So he was kind enough in providing me some updates. There's some internal strife at the Bureau going on. They did add some additional new political appointees in the last month, and those folks appear to be the ones that are kind of saying we're not going to provide any external information. So snooping around internally, what I found out is that they are still working out the differential privacy issues. They have not come up with solutions to some of the big problems, and the big problems include the fact that they can't marry up the household data and the personal characteristic data in any way that makes sense. So again, that would mean, for example, that you would not be able to tell a very accurate number about parents that are raising children with it by household or ethnicity by household. They also have not been able to produce files for American Indian tribal nations that really are of any kind of data quality. They have not decided on the final amount of what they call the differential privacy budget, the epsilon, which is how much they're going to allocate. It's the trade-off between privacy and accuracy, and so they still have not set that limit. The deadline was the 15th yesterday, but nothing was announced. They are planning on releasing another microdata set based on their newest iterations of differential privacy, and I've been working with Heather Zimmerman over in the epidemiology group. She has been reviewing those files for me because I haven't had time to focus on this like I should. So once I get an update from her, I will let you know, but at this point I haven't really heard anything from her. So what I would say overall is, again, that the Bureau is not really providing much information on where they are. They're not updating their website. And so we're kind of stuck in limbo land. I think the questions that come out now is where do we put pressure on the Bureau from a state perspective? Once the census is over, that's going to be kind of my main focus, is to think about the two sides of looking more closely at this data and what differential privacy does to the microdata files, but also how can we push back about these decisions and that the Bureau is making. Just other questions? I mean, I guess at that point I'll pause for questions or any kind of updates.
I have a question, Jenny.
Hi, Janet.
For Mary. Hi, Mary. How are you?
I'm hanging in there. It's my 1275th day working on the census. I actually looked it up this morning. So yeah, we're doing well.
Oh, good, good. And thanks always for all your help on our projects.
Absolutely.
I just kind of more of a policy question, I guess, given this differential privacy obstacle. Are you working at all with the Department of Commerce, Montana, and all of the grants that we do through HUD and
right? Yeah. So with
how does that inability to get those the data that is important for communities that are applying for grants or for doing special districts that have to meet certain criteria that we only can get through the census data? So to me that seems kind of the end use as they call it, the business applications. How are you negotiating or navigating that part of it?
Great question, Janet. And I think the really big problem we have right now is because we don't have the file, right? So we don't really know. We're waiting for this next release for the September file for what they've done now, because what they're doing is they've been doing these series of sprints where they've made these adjustments in terms of the application of differential privacy, which is also known as the disclosure avoidance system. So you'll see DAS and differential privacy sort of both used. But anyway, we've been waiting for these files, and they give out the files. They're like 2 or 3 sprints ahead of us, the Bureau is. So we are not even up to date to what they've actually done in terms of differential privacy, but they're just giving us out these little micro files for us to look at. Until we actually look at the September data, it's very difficult for us to really determine what it's going to do, not only for the policy decisions like you're talking about, for example, housing units. I don't know how you make good decisions about housing units when you don't have good data on how many vacant housing units you are. I don't know how you do that. But also the funding. And so think about the fact that we won't have accurate data, for example, in terms of the count of American Indians across the state, which of course things like BIA, Indian Health Services, all use that data, including there's a HUD program that does tribal housing, use that data for funding. With the application of differential privacy, it can introduce as much as 50% variance into the data. And so again, my example that I had presented before was the idea that in Havre, there was a community that showed, only one community in Montana that showed that they had 0 vacant housing units, that every housing unit was used. With the application of differential privacy on the files that they released last December, all of a sudden we had 52 communities that had showed that they didn't have any vacant housing. That's an incredibly big difference, and I don't know how you make good, I don't know how Jennifer Olson, head of this seat over at the Community Development Division, I don't know how she and her staff make good decisions about funding on that kind of data. I can tell you that the Bureau is now, or the user groups outside of the Bureau, so the FSCPE, which does the population estimates, they are looking at actually moving away from the Census Bureau data to find other sources because they are so concerned that the data that's going to come out of this is not going to be suitable to do good population estimates.
Right. And I'm sure you thought of this, just as a recommendation, not only the applications to GIS, but the whole notion that, the Montana League of Cities and Towns, yep, Montana Nation of Counties are going to probably be very interested in how this will affect, again, both grant flows as well as, Montana law has a variety of different district designations, federal tax law, yep, like enterprise.
Oh, it just goes, yeah, it goes on and on. And I've been really lucky, Janet, in that this whole census effort that we're doing, MACO, League of Cities and Towns, all these folks have actually partnered with me on the census push.
Oh, good.
So they're much more knowledgeable than I think they've ever been, probably than they ever wanted to be, but definitely than they ever were before, about the census and its implications. And so this is going to be an easy sell for me. But again, I just don't know what to tell them because we're just flying blind. We don't have really good information that we can analyze yet. And I'm hoping they put out this file very quickly. But what my fear is they're going to announce the final decision on differential privacy and what that trade-off between accuracy and privacy is going to be before we've even had a chance to analyze the files. And the Bureau right now, like I said, any information coming out of the Bureau has to be, they put out an official statement yesterday saying it has to be okayed by the White House. And that's any statement from the Bureau. So that's not just differential privacy, that's everything about the census as well. Because, they've got lots and lots of lawsuits going on right at the moment as well.
Yes, so. Good, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah. Wasn't quite what I expected for this, but
Other discussion with Mary?
Mary, can you speak a little bit about the October 5th deadline in the federal for giving comment on the federal registry?
So there's a federal registry notice that the Bureau put out that's about the count review program. It's CQR, Count Question Resolution Program. That's the traditional program every 10 years that the census allows jurisdictions to challenge their count. And in this particular registration, registry notice, it says that the only counts that will be allowed to be challenged are the counts of total population, total number of housing units, and that anything below that level will not be challenged, nor can the state challenge its overall number. And the reason for not being able to challenge subpopulations is differential privacy. So think, let's take the Crow Reservation. So the Crow Reservation could come in as a tribal nation and challenge its overall count of residents, its overall count of housing units, but they couldn't challenge the percent of their population, of the resident population that is American Indian. And that's because they're saying differential privacy will create enough noise in the data that you won't have accurate enough data to challenge it. And that's crazy. I'm just going to say it. And so what I am doing is I'm waiting. I'm in part of a coalition with the state of New York that is leading the creation of a response to that Federal Registry notice. A guy named Joe Salvo over in New York, who's their demographer, is writing up a model response to the Federal Registry notice. And so I'm working with that group, waiting for that sort of model response. And then I'm also working with Susan Reagan, who is the head of the State Data Center for New Mexico, to tweak whatever response that comes out to add some really specific language about tribal populations. In Montana right now, just to give you an idea, I mean, the Northern Cheyenne right now, we're at 12% of the Northern Cheyenne counted. With 14 days to go. There is no way, 12% of the households, there is no way that we're going to be able to get all those households. It's about 1,200 households that have not yet been enumerated in the census. So the ability to challenge that subpopulation data in terms of the number of American Indians is critical. Not only that, but just by age and everything else, because as Janet mentioned, funding is directly tied, so is a lot of planning, so is a lot of reporting. And so we need to be able to challenge that as well. And so once I get some information from Joe and we have a chance to put that out, I will put out a draft statement so folks can look at it and comment in the midst of, trying to get the census completed. The deadline for the replying to the Federal Registry notice is October 5th. The other thing I've been pushing is that asking both the governor's office about the idea of joining some of these lawsuits about the count and how it's going, and that it's probably not going to be very accurate. And so I know that the governor's office is monitoring that and seeing, there's 24 states so far that have filed suit against the shortened deadline and the problems that they see with an inaccurate census. So it's sort of like, trying to keep these balls moving in the meantime of trying to make sure that we get that other 20% of Montana counted.
Mary, thank you. Again, thanks for taking the time to be with us today.
Oh, sure. You bet, Jenny. Well, thank you all. And thanks for all the great work you guys do. It's just amazing. So have me back soon and we can have some more better discussion with some real numbers and some ideas ahead of us.
Sounds good.
Thanks again.
Thanks so much.
Thanks. I wanted to share an update with the council on legislative progress related to House Bill 633. For those of you who aren't familiar with 633, it was a study bill that was passed by the 2019 legislative session to study different kinds of funding sources to help diversify and stabilize the funding for the state library. And over the past year, a subcommittee of the Legislative Finance Committee has looked at a variety of options, and their work has resulted in 3 committee actions. All of those committee actions were approved unanimously by the Legislative Finance Committee as a whole at their meeting yesterday. So I'm going to drop into the chat links to 2 pieces of legislation, and then so you can have them for reference, and then we'll talk about what some of those mean. The first bill that they approved is legislation that would increase that MLIA recordation fee that we talked about earlier from $1 to $2. And I mentioned the fact that our recordation fee, the MLIA fee, is one of a number of fees that are collected through that recordation fee legislation. Currently, the state collects $7 in recordation fees, or I should say that the statute allows for the collection of $7 per page in recordation fees. $1 of that is the dollar that is available for MLIA work that Aaron mentioned, and the 75 cents of that coming to the state, 25 cents staying in the county. This legislation, as I said, would double that MLIA fee from $1 to $2, and it would keep that percentage split between the state and county governments. So the state library would receive $1.50 and counties would receive 50 cents. This legislation has had 2 hearings so far, first with the Education Subcommittee, and then again yesterday with the Legislative Finance Committee as a whole. As I said, both of those hearings resulted in unanimous support for this draft legislation. So this will be carried as a committee bill in the 2021 legislative session. Representative Dave Beatty, who was the chair of the Education Subcommittee, will be carrying this legislation as its primary sponsor on behalf of the Legislative Finance Committee. The representatives who spoke with regard to the legislation were Chantel Saparis. She was speaking on behalf of the clerks and recorders of the state of Montana. There's some discussion about that association also increasing some of the recordation fees. Some of that funding goes to help support records management at the local government level, and they're interested in evaluating whether or not they want to propose increasing those fees and perhaps working collaboratively with us on maybe a single piece of legislation or legislation that's mutually supportive for that effort. So we'll want to make sure, of course, that we continue our outreach to that stakeholder group as well as MACO in general. But I'm feeling optimistic about this piece of legislation. The second piece of legislation that the committee adopted yesterday was legislation that would create a statutory appropriation from the state 911 funds to the state library to continue the GIS assessment work that the state library did back in 2018, 2019. What is proposed is that $450,000 a year be appropriated to the state library from that source of revenue. If you're not familiar with that funding source, it's roughly $1 per month from each phone line in the state. Quinn Ness and his staff administer those funds, and he's available to answer any more specific questions about the funding source itself. In the 2017 legislative session, the state library was appropriated $80,000 to conduct a one-time only GIS data assessment to look at the readiness of the state's GIS data to plan for an eventual adoption of next generation 911, and found that there's significant need to improve the overall data and the lack of resources to do that work ongoing. I was really interested to hear from Frank the number of new addresses in Gallatin County in just 1 month. I think that's a perfect illustration of the need for ongoing data assessment and data updates that will be required to support next generation 911 in the future. So through this appropriation, if passed, the state library intends to enter into a contract with a private vendor to provide technology for local governments, local jurisdictions to do that kind of ongoing GIS data assessment on a regular basis. And then because we're doing that at the statewide level, we would have the ability to better evaluate the gaps in the data and the need for significant updates and direct resources, such as our MLIA grant program, to where those resources are most necessary. And then we would also fund some staff to help those local jurisdictions that don't have dedicated GIS resources to actually implement improvements to their data based on that ongoing assessment work. Again, this legislation was approved unanimously by both the Education Subcommittee as well as the LFC yesterday. We've heard from stakeholder groups, including the 911 Advisory Council, the Montana Association of Counties, and the Montana Telecommunications Association, and generally hearing positive support there. We want to continue to engage with the Public Safety Answering Points, local governments, sheriffs and peace officers association, and other stakeholder groups in anticipation of this legislation being carried in the 2021 legislative session. Senator Janet Ellis from Helena will be the primary sponsor of this legislation on behalf of the Legislative Finance Committee moving into that legislative session. And then there's a third recommendation that came out of the LFC yesterday. It's a recommendation to Governor Bullock's budget director, Director Tom Livers, to implement a couple of different cost allocations to state agencies to help fund work of the digital library, as well as some of our more specific natural resource information system needs. They've communicated that recommendation to Director Livers, and Director Livers is evaluating that recommendation as he prepares the governor's budget to be released later in November. So continued positive news there. We'll be working with the legislature to prepare for the advocacy work necessary ahead of the legislative session. I'm happy to answer any questions you have or to take your comments and feedback about that advocacy work.
Jenny, is this document available for download on the site? I didn't see where that was.
Yes, the draft legislation. They're both available from the legislative website.
Okay. I'll add it to the meeting materials. It's not out there right now.
Yeah.
Frank, it's in the chat. She just dropped it in the chat.
But, I see it now. Okay, great. Thank you.
For those of you that have access to the chat, otherwise I'll send it out after the meeting.
Thanks, Erin. We do have an FAQ we've prepared for the 911 legislation, and I'll be working with staff to prepare an FAQ for the MLIA recordation fee legislation. That'll be part of a legislative packet that will go to the legislators sponsoring the bills. Okay. All right, Erin, did you want to give the strategic planning update?
Absolutely. Okay. So we are working, we continue to work with AppGeo. Bill Johnson gave a presentation at the June meeting. He works with AppGeo. He's the former GIO for the state of New York. And basically we're working to develop a scope of work right now to put in place for the development of the GIS strategic plan. And basically we just got our hands on the scope, and so we're working with them now. But the overview, I'll give you an overview of what that's probably going to look like, is they'll be doing a GIS stakeholder survey. We're going to try to separate that out between a survey for the highly technical GIS folks, and then for the folks that just use services and maybe aren't using the data as intensely as someone like an analyst or a technician. And and then we will have some interviews conducted based on I guess the project group's choice of key folks that we want to get feedback from, and we'll outline who those exactly are as a part of the process during our project kickoff. They're also going to be able to facilitate 2 virtual stakeholder workshops, and then start the actual drafting once all that facilitation and interviews and surveys have been completed. Use that information to draft a strategic plan. The entire process itself should take roughly 6 months. So if we can get the contract into place, we will have soon we'll have something before the end of this fiscal year. The second part of the process that we're going to conduct with AppGeo is once we identify some of the main goals and objectives in the strategic plan, there'll be room to actually create a business plan or next steps document for one of those major goals that have been identified. And so there's a lot of things we're always talking about as the council, whether it's MSDI theme review or returns on investment for our MSDI layers, the transportation framework reboot, that's another one we've talked about. So we'll basically poll our stakeholders, poll the council and in the MEGIP community, and pretty much any and all users that will be willing to participate to identify those key goals that we want to work on. And then this will be a 5-year plan, and hopefully we can put it into place and integrate the maybe not this coming land information plan, depending upon when we get it, but the following land information plans, so that everything kind of flows together nicely. So I guess that's all I have for now. What I would like, I guess, to understand what the council might want is we can set aside a working group to kind of review what's going on or participate in the process. So I guess I would like the feedback from the council on that. I think there were a few people that were identified at the last meeting, and I do have those still written or documented on who might volunteer. But I guess we can have that discussion now.
I do have a question, Erin. This is Janet. What, and you might have mentioned it and I missed it. Is that strategic planning process going to include any piece of one of our future meetings where we all actually are participating in some kind of facilitated discussion?
I'm not sure if it can include the entire council. I'll have to work with AppGeo to see if that's something, if they need a subset. I would basically take their recommendation, and then also if that's something that the council does want to have, then we would try to make that a part of our future schedule, and then also a part of the current scope development.
Yeah, and again, doing strategic planning for organizations, I think sometimes just even if you have a smaller working group, having the ability to at least have one opportunity for all of us to at least, it doesn't have to be very long. It can be just simply, asking some key questions and going around the table and soliciting responses, I think would enable the council as a whole to have more ownership in the process. Particularly, if someone would like to contribute but doesn't necessarily, want to or has the additional time, this way it would kind of offer an opportunity for all of us to be included.
Thanks, Janet. I think that's useful feedback.
Hey, Erin, this is Gordy. Does the scope of this include the stakeholders that just go to the site and download various data such as cadastral?
Yeah, so we would do our best to try. We don't have a list of those people that do that,
yeah.
But we would do our best to try, to use whatever avenues that we have to locate those users and then to send out communication to those users. And like I said, when I was initially speaking with Kate Hickey, she's one of the ones who's going to be working with Bill Johnson on this strategic planning process with us. I said, you know, we want to, you know, we have our very technical users who are going to come in and you know, give feedback on data models and, you know, how we need to move forward on certain layers and be very technical. And then we'll be, you know, we'll want to be also including those people who say, oh yeah, I use Cadastral all the time, but that's as far as their extent of the data pretty much goes, is just the applications that we've built, or, you know, services that they might link to in their part of their workflows. So we want to be able to hit both groups. And so that will be done again in a GIS stakeholder survey. There'll be interviews. Again, we will outline, I guess they're talking no more than roughly 9 stakeholder interviews. So we'll want to be very strategic in who we're exactly interviewing, and then facilitating 2 virtual workshops that the intent is to engage the GIS community on the strategic planning process and then gather input towards the overall vision and goals. I don't know if we want to try to have 3 and include the council, solely the council on one of those, or just guide the council to be a part of one or 2, if not both. So.
Erin, this is Dawn, and I feel like I maybe missed something, because I guess I have some, just like, if you could give a broad overview maybe of what this strategic planning process is. I'm not sure if I missed it at the last meeting. I know there weren't notes from the last one, but just what's the intent, what's the scope, what are we trying to inform by doing this strategic planning process? Is it just for MLIA? Is it for a broader scope? If you could just maybe give me a little bit of background.
Sure. Yeah. The strategic planning. So Bill Johnson from AppGeo gave a presentation at the last, I think it was the June council meeting, regarding the importance of strategic planning to kind of setting our overarching broad goals. And so the last strategic plan that we had in place, I will open that up right now. I do believe the last time it was updated, it was in 2014, and that's just a kind of an update to a very old strategic plan. So basically, we will be, I guess one of the things that I was kind of having some reoccurring issues with, and I reached out to Bill as the former GIO, or he might have been the GIO at the time, and was kind of talking to him about is, you know, we kind of, you know, are hashing the same things over and over again, and there's a lot going on, and, you know, how, you know, what's the best way to kind of focus what we're doing as a state. And one of the things he had mentioned is, you know, it's really a strategic plan is a really great tool to use to help guide the direction of GIS in the state. And so in regards to the actual what it's addressing, if it's just MLIA, I would like to see it go beyond just MLIA. You know, there's a lot of work that we do with NRIS, and so I would like it to be more of a broad geospatial strategic plan for Montana, and a tool that hopefully is valuable to anyone in the state.
Dawn, I'll jump in there as well. I think the goal is to really hear from stakeholders about not only the priorities for how the state of Montana is investing and leveraging resources to support GIS, but where we can make more inroads in adoption of GIS. And then I think too, looking more specifically at MLIA, where we can leverage the resources we have to support that local, state, federal cooperative model that we have for much of our themes, and also to try to support and leverage stakeholder work that's specific to the different MSDI themes. I don't think it's necessary for us to visit every MSDI theme, and a lot of the themes are doing a great job of stakeholder engagement, evaluating the priorities, and making sure that as the themes are developed, they're meeting stakeholder needs. We saw that with Troy's work with elevation and Jessica's work with land cover, and I hope we can do something very similar with transportation. But I think it's helpful to have sort of that external perspective that can come through some facilitated feedback and discussions to just kind of have a level set and an external feedback process about how effectively we are evaluating stakeholder needs and working to leverage our resources to be able to adopt appropriate models across the broader spatial data infrastructure and looking at those implications for the MLIA as well.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, it was more a question of whether it was a broad plan, which is kind of what I think Erin was getting at, was she's looking at trying to make it broad. It was just the way the wording was. It was MLIA strategic planning process. So just wanted a little bit more information there. Thanks.
Yep, you bet. Thanks. Other questions? Sorry, I know the agenda says we'll wrap up by 1, but I want to allow for enough time for discussion about the land plan. So I hope most of you can hang with us for some time this afternoon. I would like to take a break until 1 to allow folks a chance to get something to eat. So if you can come back at 1, we'll talk more about the land plan and the land plan process for this coming year. So go ahead and we'll leave the meeting going if you want to mute yourself or stop your video, and then plan to be back at 1. I wanted to make a few points as we start the discussion about the land plan. We're going to be using the FY21 land plan as the basis for our discussion for the FY22 land plan. We appreciate your understanding. We've had limited time to work on the land plan this year as a result of the pandemic, but we want to get the process going. Using the FY21 land plan, we're using the same budget amount, $938,000. We don't, of course, have a final appropriation amount from the legislature for fiscal year 22. That will come through the 2021 legislative session. And as we've talked about, there's the potential for significantly increased funding that could be available, both as a result of potential legislation as well as just the increased collections that Erin reported on earlier. It would take legislative action to grant us more authority to spend dollars in line with any kind of increased collections, regardless of the status of the updated recordation fees. So at this time, it seems prudent to just use our current funding level for the basis of the budget for the FY22 land plan. And if we are successful in seeing increased funds for this work, then we would bring that information back to the council at a later, likely April or June council meeting to talk about amendments to the land plan in line with any kind of future funding. Just a word or two about the process going forward. We want to get council input today about the priorities that you would like to see in the FY22 land plan. We do, of course, need to do a public comment period, and based on the feedback from your meeting last November, we're going to have another interim council meeting for those of you who can attend at the end of the 30-day public comment period, so that the council has more time to consider and reflect on the public comments that we receive about the plan before we ask the council to take action on the plan at your November meeting. So we'll have a discussion today. We'll create any updates to the plan, share that with the council, go through the public comment period, and then have an interim meeting at the end of that comment period to consider the public comments, consider any modifications to the plan that the council might want to make as a result of those public comments before action at the council meeting in November. Any questions about the process going forward? All right, Erin, do you want to go ahead and lead the council through looking at the current land plan? And council members, as you have questions or suggestions, please just interrupt us so we can make note of any suggestions that you have.
Sure, absolutely. So the council has taken action in the past and has had a lot of discussion about basically taking this plan and trying to apply it to possibly 2 years. The current legislation says that we need to have a land plan adopted annually, and just to kind of rehash some of the discussion in the past, and what the council had discussed was taking a land plan that's in place and maybe doing some a refresh or some minor adjustments, but basically keeping that in place over a multiple year period and just approving that plan every year. So last year we did make some, even though, you know, with that being said, we did make some significant updates given that the plan for FY 2021 was, excuse me, FY 2020 was written still kind of reeling from the effects of the 2017 budget cuts, and so we wanted to take that information and add more and then update it to kind of reflect the new normal. And so the first piece of the plan is the executive summary, and and that basically goes into basically summarizing the entire document, what you would typically find in an executive summary, and then we go into the actual components of the land plan or the Land Information Act in general. And this was one of the areas we enhanced more last year because we wanted to explain all the different pieces of the act, which includes the plan itself, give an explanation about the grant program, GIS coordination, and of course the land information account. And then the advisory council. And then the new addition last year was key dates, because I think it's important to see some of the dates that are important when trying to understand the creation of a land plan, the update of a land plan, and then also the grant program and how we operate on an annual basis. And then we basically dive right into the goals, and there was a lot of discussion about the goals in the November meeting, and so I think that might be one place I might just try to pause. These are overarching goals for the entire plan, and then we dive in deeper for each individual section. We have further program goals, but I do remember it was I think it was goal number 2 that the council had some issues with, and so I guess I'll take a pause there, and I'll if I don't hear anything, we can keep moving forward and let the discussion happen naturally. But That being said, is there any discussion about the current land information goals?
So, Erin, this is Janet. Can you remind us of what the issues were on goal 2?
I do not have that pulled up in front of me. Hold on just one second. I'll pull up the executive summary to see if that's outlined. Here is the executive summary from last from the November meeting, and I guess I'm not sure it's exactly stated here. This is what was documented. Does anyone else have a recollection with the? Is anyone, I guess, not in favor of the current goals?
Erin, this is Dawn. I think I was one of the people that maybe had something to say about goal 2 and that it seemed rather lengthy compared to the other 3 goals that are listed there. And it was just a little bit, it wasn't shortened to the point. So it was kind of a question that if that's your goal, how can you measure whether or not you're actually meeting that goal? I'm trying to remember back, and of course I have none of my notes or anything with me from that last meeting. Yeah. They're all in my desk somewhere. So I think that was one of the things that I may have said related to that specific goal.
I think it also, I think it was brought up that it was possibly overlapping some of the other ones as well. But
Erin, I think you're right. It seems a little bit like the focus on the critical business processes articulated in goal 2 is somewhat redundant to goal 3. I think goal 2 is really about making sure that with regard to MSDI, we have a consistent process across the themes of evaluating the framework for those themes and infrastructure necessary to keep those themes up to date.
That would almost seem, this is Janet, this would almost seem, as Dawn hinted at, what Jenny just described would almost be an evaluative process for goal number 1. It's more of a process in support of a goal than a goal itself, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
I think that makes sense.
Could you almost stop it at the end of stable infrastructure? Or for the Montana State Library and Agency? Is the goal to actually ensure the existence of the framework and stable infrastructure? Is that really what the goal is?
I think so, Gordy, and I think I think a key component of that stable infrastructure is the feedback process, and as Janet said, the evaluation process for each of the themes to make sure they're meeting stakeholder needs. So there's the collection and maintenance of the data, and then there's the evaluation process and stakeholder engagement.
Does anyone have any, besides, or have a problem with what Gordy has suggested at stopping it at?
I was wondering if you make it like more general, if it wouldn't be like goal number 1, because it is general, and then the other 2 are more specific, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like this, Matt. I like the idea of stopping it after stewarding agencies or the council, because we can benefit from a nice framework and stable infrastructure too. But if there's a way to make it more generic, that works for me too.
Thanks, Matt.
I just pulled up the statute, sorry, this is Dawn again, about the land plan. And it says that the land plan, annually develop the land plan that describes the priority needs to collect, maintain, and disseminate land information. So now I'm wondering if, I'm wondering how do these goals relate to those things? Or is the goal of the land plan to describe the priority needs to collect, maintain, and disseminate land information? Are we going too far away from the original intent of what the land plan is supposed to do?
Yeah, it seems like after the word infrastructure, this is Dan, after the word infrastructure, kind of get into the weeds a little bit about like who the information is going to be disseminated to, or who it's for. And is that really important in a stated goal? I mean, I'm back to the suggestion at leaving it at ensure the existence of an organizational framework and stable infrastructure, period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and based on working on Dan's start there, we're talking in goal number 1 about consistency in collection. In goal number 3, we're talking about the quality of the work based on, essentially number 3 is to assure a good quality for business practices. And then the 3rd is about promoting GIS across a variety of constituencies. So the goal 2 should then somehow deal with the stability. If we're showing consistency in number 1, quality in number 3, promotion number 4, in number 2, we're really saying we're actually ensuring the stability of the organizational framework, or stability of the infrastructure itself. So if we want to sort of look at parallelism there, we're really talking about stability in the second one.
Yeah, hey, this is Rob. Janet, that's a good point. And along those lines, would you therefore suggest in goal number 1 to inject a word after collection to say stable or reliable?
So to kind of go back to what Dawn was saying, the purpose of the legislation, I can just throw that up real quick, but read it for you, for those of you who aren't online, is to develop a standardized, sustainable method to collect. I mean, we could just pull straight from this language straight from the purpose itself.
Yeah.
If we
Yeah, I
do
mean,
that, I think we'd almost be combining 1 and 2 in terms of what you want to get to. If that indeed is in following Don's and Rob's suggestion, we're almost combining those 1 and 2 in some fashion, which would be okay if that doesn't screw up the rest of the plan. But that would be, you know, because we're talking about the integrity of the system, or the consistency, and then we'd be adding stability in that sense.
This, Matt, the one thing, the organizational framework language there, that to me addresses the grants topics in the document more than any of the other content from any of the other goals. So, or maybe I'm missing something here when I'm skimming through. But should one of these goals at least kind of touch on the grants a little bit?
I think number 3 also hints at the grants too, I think.
And let's say, and number 1.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I think number 4 also, you know, I think you could even do that in number 4, you know, where we promote the use of GIS across the state through funding, coordination, education, and outreach.
I like that too.
Yeah, I like that.
Yep. Okay, yeah, it's covered.
May I suggest grant funding?
Sure.
No, Jenny, you're shaking your head.
I think that's specific.
Okay, all right.
There are other forms of funding. I might even suggest kind of reordering these goals just a little bit. I'm sort of just brainstorming here, but if we were to start with the language in goal 3 as the overarching goal that we're trying to achieve, that we're improving the quality and efficiency of business processes of our stakeholders through GIS and adoption, you know, that should be sort of the ultimate goal that we're trying to achieve. And we do that work firstly by engaging with the various stakeholders themselves, be it the working groups for the different themes, local governments, grant recipients, and those other stakeholders. So perhaps goal 2 is what's focused on engagement around understanding the business needs for the work. And then goal 3 is the consistent collection, accurate maintenance, and dissemination of the data. And I agree that touches on the grant funding. It focuses on our work to leverage funding from different sources, as we've seen articulated in the work with LIDAR going forward. And then once we have that data collected that's meeting the needs of the stakeholders, then we promote the use of it around the state.
So what numbers again, quickly in order?
I would put number, yeah, as Aaron has them, kind of what was goal 3 is now.
Oh, I see. I wasn't looking up there. Okay.
Yeah, and what is goal 2? Leave that goal 2, but make it focused on that stakeholder engagement piece. And I think that does get to Janet's point about the stability of the themes themselves. If they're not meeting stakeholder needs, then they're certainly not going to be supported and therefore stable.
Yes, I like that very much. That gets better.
And then I think we can make goal 2 more shorter and more succinct, as you were saying.
Yeah, the only comment I'd have as it's edited right now is we use the word stable twice.
We could just say ensure the existence defined as sustainable stability of the organizational framework infrastructure. Just get rid of and stable.
What was the first part, Janet? Could you repeat that, please?
Keeping it the same. Ensure the existence, which you've defined as sustainability, stability of an organizational framework infrastructure. I think that's great. Although I have to admit, I'm not exactly sure the use of the word organizational in this context. Framework infrastructure is understandable. But if I just would like that. I'm not saying that we should get rid of it, but just curious about your use, the use of the word organizational there.
How about organized?
That looks good. That makes sense.
We could call out just spatial data infrastructure.
That's great too. I like that. That's even better because it's more precise.
The word collaborative is in my mind, denoting that, you know, we seek feedback from multiple sectors, multiple stakeholders.
I think you make a good point, because in my mind, that goes without saying when you're talking about a spatial data infrastructure, but maybe that's something that actually needs to be defined here.
Do you think collaborative instead of organized?
Yeah.
I mean, organized is kind of assumed, but we'd hopefully do that.
Yeah.
I like to collaborate. Yeah.
Yeah, I do think it needs to be called out, Erin. I think we're doing better at having a much more deliberate process for ensuring that collaboration, but I think it's important to articulate that that is our intent.
Yeah, and that's nice too, because collaborative not only does it, kind of indicate that people are coming together and thinking about things, but also doing the work too, like the talks about theme leads and such. So I think that helps simplify the old goal 2 content.
I think this looks great. I don't think we need to worry about perfection right now, but because we will have time to come back to it in future meetings. But if we're happy with this point, I think we can maybe move on.
The only other thing I might suggest, and I've been sitting here nodding my head quietly, agreeing with everything you guys have done to make these changes. This is terrific, but in goal 4, I forget what we replaced, but anyway, we added the word funding, and having or not having a comma there after funding changes the meaning. So I wonder, yeah.
Thanks, Lena.
that really changes the meaning of the phrase.
No kidding. Okay. Okay, so moving on to the next section. So this describes the spatial data infrastructure. And then we jump right into the land plan priorities. And so the first set of priorities we come upon are the council priorities. And so I will leave them up there. Keep in mind, we're going to be doing this strategic planning process. And so that might be something that we want to maybe, in regards to the council priorities, we could probably adjust those prior to next fiscal year if needed, if something comes out of it regarding the strategic planning process. But I just wanted to throw that out there. The grants, we're going to have to identify funding quite quickly, and we'll have those grants, published and prioritized prior to the beginning of the fiscal year. So that's maybe something we can't be as flexible about, but I just wanted to remind folks that if something does come up through this strategic planning process, we might be able to edit this section prior to the fiscal year beginning.
This is an area of the plan that kind of exemplifies the point that Aaron was making for me about the need to have some more stability in the plans themselves. Aaron shared the grant dashboard earlier in the meeting. We had a really good discussion about how that's shaping up and some of the way that that dashboard is really going to, I hope, help us evaluate how the grant program is helping us achieve the goals of the land plan, and where any gaps might be. That speaks directly to goal 2 under these council priorities, because this is the FY21 council priority and we're in the midst of that work. The council doesn't benefit from having the results of that evaluation to help inform FY22's land plan. I hope certainly by the end of this fiscal year, we have a lot more information from that dashboard. And certainly by FY23, we should have a lot more information. But I just don't feel like we're in a place where it would be appropriate for us to make significant land plan changes while we are in the midst of the work of the FY21 land plan. Any other thoughts about council goals? Okay.
I just had one thought. This is Janet on the goal. I was just rereading them. Priorities. I think that in the key themes, no, that's not there either. I think that we have sort of an overarching, I don't know if I want to word policy, but being more on the planning policy side, I always look at things through those eyes. I was thinking of going back to that goal about working with various agencies and organizations to promote GIS. I think maybe we need something in there of the priorities that we are perhaps the representatives at the state level of GIS concerns, that coordination with other entities is important. This all of these priorities are technical in nature, which is what most of you are focused on. But I just wondered if we want to also include coordination, just as we talked with on the census about, working as we do with League of Cities and Towns and other groups as necessary. And I don't mean it to add more work, but I think inherent in a lot of this is our ability to be representative of the GIS community in working with other groups. So I don't know how you would incorporate that as a statement. Maybe it's just maybe support that goal in some way in helping to promote GIS throughout the state.
This is Dan. Can someone post a link to the statute in the chat box? I'm having trouble finding it.
I'll do that right now. There you go.
Thanks, Aaron.
You're welcome. I like Janet's idea. I wonder, Janet, would it be best to start with establishing some sort of framework, whether it's inviting another group in to participate or, something that the council does regularly to reach out? I mean, you always have the opportunity to coordinate as a council member with outside organizations. And then this year we actually have the ability to make everyone NSGIC members, and Marlis is working on that right now, and that's another way to collaborate with other councils across the US. I'm wondering if there's something specific that the council might want to try to do or develop a framework for typical coordination or collaboration with other groups such as Marls. And Dan, I would rely on you, MAGIP, obviously.
I'm thinking, words like support outreach or support collaborative efforts with other groups. And I know you're looking for more specificity. I'm just trying to think. I know that the makeup of the council doesn't specifically identify some of these other groups, but I think, both through our membership as well as through our outreach programs, to be able to, I guess I'm thinking specifically of the way that you promote the grants program. You make use of MACO and the League, for example, to help advertise the grant program. So I'm not suggesting a new task. I'm just wanting to acknowledge that we are fostering these relationships in order to promote the goals of the land use plan. The relationships themselves help us to achieve our goals. That's so the grants would be one example. The work that Jenny is doing on behalf of the council and the GIS program in the legislature, those are all the kinds of things those are the role of the advisory council in assuring that role that GIS plays in the state's kind of policy infrastructure, or that kind of thing, if that makes sense.
I think it does, Janet. I might even include the word educate. I know advocate is a sticky word for some council members, not necessarily for others, but at a minimum, especially in your example, as we approach the legislative session, while some of you might not be able to advocate directly on behalf of legislation, I hope you're all in a role to at least speak to or educate people within your organizations and communities about the work that we do that can help inform the legislative process.
Are we expanding on number D then? Or is it a separate thought?
I think those things are they're part of a council charter and part of a council's direction. I don't think that they necessarily belong as part of a land information plan. It's just my 2 cents. Again, trying to be a little bit more focused, I think, on trying to make sure that this land plan is focusing on the land information. And if we want to amend what the council's roles are and responsibilities and what we intend to do, that might be a separate effort, in my opinion.
Okay. So Dawn, I understand what you're saying, and I think of this more as, you know, maybe this is a personal issue. I'm on this council not because I'm a GIS professional, but because I am a community development specialist and have worked with the GIS community in terms of helping it to coordinate and collaborate with other groups and to assure that GIS information is made part of the processes that local governments engage in. So I'm kind of, I think that in order to do 1 through the first 2 things, I think that we have to, this is part and parcel of that responsibility that you clearly have articulated. I think that in order to do number 1 and 2, we have to maintain these relationships. I think it's a tool, and we're not here in terms of, you know, overall goals, but rather in terms of the way our council, you know, it's situated in its overall arching goals to promote GIS, which is embodied in one of our goals. So I think it's more, as I say, kind of from a personal perspective, professional perspective that I have, that's different than many of the people in this group. And that I see how GIS fits into the larger small p political policy issues that face Montana.
And perhaps there's a need for a little bit of a balance between both. You know, I appreciate Dawn's point about that being sort of part of the mandate of the council. And in this way, there is a need for that broader education and outreach. And in the land plan, I think too, and I think this gets to Erin's point about the strategic planning process, as we identify those more specific goals, I think through the land plan, we can be more concrete and specific about specific educational and outreach opportunities, collaborative coordination opportunities that are specific to the goals of the land plan and or the strategic plan.
Well, this does seem to start to read more like a strategic plan than what we've traditionally thought the land plan was designed to address. I'm a little concerned that having a lot of this generic sort of language in here takes away from the specific nature of annual land plans that I think were always intended to be very narrow in their focus about what the annual goals were. And it does seem like this is starting to kind of expand out beyond that into, like I said, a little more generic conceptual framework. And that I really agree with Dawn that perhaps the priorities for the Land Information Advisory Council while they need to be part of the strategic plan, but in each year's annual land plan, to get them honed in better would be more useful to the council members as far as what exactly are we going to try and get done this year that supports the land plan goals. And I think maybe that's what you were alluding to, Jenny, but is there a way to get it more specific right here from the get-go?
May I make a suggestion? I think that we need the priorities of the land, of the council, if we're going to be using any kind of money to support these activities. So what if we were more specific and we had like a measurable priority, in that we actually identified, and we don't have to do this today, of course, but we actually identify a group to reach out to as a council, whether it's, you know, someone eventually attending a NSGIC conference and working with, a NSGIC conference in person, someone from the council attending one of those and then working with other council members from different states, from other states' councils, or specifically reaching out to an association maybe we've never tried to partner with or educate. And so maybe if we choose something that's more measurable, then it'd be more, I guess, in regards to what Catherine and Dawn is saying, more appropriate for an annual plan.
Maybe too, this is a place to specifically reference the strategic plan and say that, well, prioritize education and coordination based on the goals of the strategic plan, or something like that. I don't want to get too far ahead of that process.
You know, one of the things I was thinking about what Catherine Maynard said about not trying to get too, and what you just said, Jenny, would be helpful, not to get too generalized in this. And so maybe it's more a statement about supporting the goals of the land plan, you know, in other words, tying this, maybe being, not just calling out our need to be coordinating, but in all different ways. You know, these are specific tasks, but I think in a sense, you know, furthering the goals of the land plan in all different sorts of ways is I guess what I'm really trying to get at. That these first two things seem, you know, very, very focused, you know, on the staff responsibilities associated with this. We don't necessarily do all of these things that are listed in 1 and 2. You know, Erin and her staff does this work. So I'm trying to think of us in terms of our, as members of the council, you know, beyond, you know, overseeing or acting in an advisory capacity. Don't we want to be supporting these goals in some fashion? Sometimes it means, as Erin pointed out, us individually acting or attending meetings or some of these other things. I'm looking at it more in terms of how we as council members function beyond simply just in, you know, monitoring what the staff is doing. And maybe I'm off base here, but I just wanted to acknowledge that our role goes, it includes has a policy element to it, has a outreach element to it in some fashion. I was just trying to reflect that somehow. Someone muted? I'm hearing silence.
Does anybody else have any additional thoughts about how we balance sort of the more general need with some specificity for the land plan?
This is Dan. I'm probably overthinking it, and we've got a good start on brainstorming here. But you know, I mean, I think our priorities should really mirror our duties. You know, that are pretty specific in the statute. You know, just running down the duties that are codified. You know, advise, review, and the third one is review the land information plan. So that's what we're doing today, right? And then advise, assist, promote, advocate. And so I guess what this part of the land plan is trying to capture is, okay, we know what our duties are, and here's how we're going to prioritize things year to year based on ways that we can support, you know, what our duties are. So, yeah, that being said, I don't think I have any more feedback other than, you know, I appreciate the discussion to try to get our priorities down on paper in a plan like this. But I'm not so sure that those priorities are going to be the same year to year, which is probably why we're struggling with this just a little bit.
Hey, this is Alan here. I woke up heavily when I heard Janet speaking about that piece. I totally agree with what she said regarding that coordination, foster relationships. I'd like to put the word foster advantageous relationships into that mix, because that is, I mean, we are kind of, you know, getting beyond maybe the land, what the council is doing regarding our duties, and getting more into a mission of what we should consider ourselves as a council to be. But I really echoed what Janet said. I really thought that was a big part of what we should be doing as a member of the council.
Any other thoughts or comments? Are we ready to move on to the grant priorities?
I put some ideas for text in the chat if it's good, bad, or otherwise.
Thanks, Gordy.
We certainly can, when we have that second session, you know, we can hash this out more, and also over email as well. Janet says she likes Gordy's words. Okay. So if we're ready to move on to the goals of the grants, and we can go ahead and do that now. I'd say the biggest change we made was trying to differentiate between well, we created a tiered system this past land plan, well, the current land plan, and identified 2 different tiers. And one is solely either contributing to the spatial data infrastructure or other statewide data collection initiatives. And so what we saw was you'd have a very well-written grant, and we didn't have a way to identify between, prioritizing MSDI over perhaps a local collection of infrastructure. And so that was what this intent was. And we've got a few folks from the grant subcommittee on the line, so please speak up if you'd like to discuss these further. But what we did was then take the priorities and then identify 2 different tiers. So then during the grant process, we had another way of prioritizing funding for applications submitted. This past year, it wasn't an issue, or this past go around with the grant program, it wasn't an issue because we were able to fund all grants that were submitted. And so we can just step through these. And the first one is to develop GIS information to support NextGen 911. Honestly, I think this is going to be a priority and for a long time. It is important to have these boundaries, addresses, and road center lines to support the NextGen 911. I don't know if we'd call it an initiative, just to support NextGen 911 in general. And so I don't think there's many grant categories or priorities that I would change. The next one being improvement to the cadastral. So that's the further collection and enhancement of the digital representation of the PLSS. That's still important. We see a need across, we have our areas, identified priority areas where we think that is extremely important. I think the one that I would maybe change a little is is calling out addressing and boundaries in regards to geo-enabled elections. And I have been working with the Secretary of State's office and then a few of the local governments that are currently pilot projects or grant program that is participating in the pilot project with NSGIC. And this is we're seeing a really great progress. And going forward, this is going to be a fantastic way to integrate MSDI data into key business processes like elections. And the geo-enabled elections and NextGen 911 are so closely tied together in regards to having good boundaries and good addresses that they really help support each other. And so it's collecting that information to improve those boundary layers to then integrate into state and local business practices. So I wouldn't change that. I just might tweak it a little regarding removing the national states, the pilot project, and kind of working with the Secretary of State to further identify and the local governments what we need for the moving forward. So I'll work on tweaking that. But I guess in regards to tier 1, and I've already spoken with Michael and Troy, and we both feel like, or all of us have kind of been in agreement that these are still a main priority for what we're working on.
Would it be advantageous in any way to combine A and C into one?
I like calling out elections.
Okay.
And I know that was brought up last time, rather to call out the layer. We used to call out the layer, so we want to update administrative boundaries, but then we tried to change it to be more relevant with an initiative or the business use, but I'd be open to discussing that.
I agree. with leaving them separate. I think it provides a little more clarity and guidance for possible, grant applications.
And I also think it perhaps gives us a little more focused way to engage with what are really largely two different stakeholder groups.
My only hesitation at that is you can't see, when you do it this way based by projects, you can't see how there's overlap and how some layers really truly are extremely important to multiple different projects. So I can see there being some advantages to calling out those specific layers. I mean, it seems to me that we keep the same priorities from year to year, and I do think that there are some MSDI layers that aren't necessarily getting the attention that they deserve. And I think that this plan is the opportunity to highlight some of those layers that really do need more attention, and things like transportation, which is definitely, part of Next Gen 911, but also has so many other uses outside of that I think if you were to do it by layer and then say what projects those layers contribute to, that would be another option to see where there's that level of overlap with those important layers.
I like the idea of making a statement to show how they tie together. Especially, the ones that we are prioritizing.
I guess I can just add to that, when I first read this last year and saw these tier 1 priorities, I was a bit surprised at some of these new initiatives. I didn't know that geo-enabled elections was something that we were, that was a major state priority. And I know I think I mentioned that at one of the last meetings. So this was just a different way of doing it, which it's not bad to try something new. I'm thinking more along the lines of we call out those MSDI themes above and indicate which ones are not being worked on with the asterisks, and perhaps trying a different approach to highlighting them would be worthwhile.
I think that's an interesting thought, Dawn. You've just given me something to think through out loud here. I really like the focus on the business needs, and the business needs driving the focus for some of the specific data development that's called out in the tier 1. I think maybe there is also room for us to identify, and I don't think it's necessarily for the grant program, but somewhere else in the land plan, for us to identify those themes that might be council priorities for investment. I think it's really useful to have the overview of the status of all of the themes. And for us to have a meaningful discussion with the council about which of those themes are worthy of continued investment. Some themes may not need as much investment simply because they're of the stage that they are in maintenance, or just a lack of priority from other kinds of stakeholder groups. We specifically called for in the FY21 land plan the work that now we are seeing develop for land cover, for example, and whether it's through the land plan budget or specific language, maybe there's a place to call attention to themes like land cover and transportation, where in addition to potential grants, there are a statement from the council that these are themes that we feel are worthy of our investment. You know, LIDAR is another example where we're seeing obvious investment, even though we haven't directed any grant funds to that theme, for example. Again, just kind of thinking out loud. But I would really love to see us, you know, really hone in and focus on the transportation theme and develop it in the way that we're seeing some of these other themes develop. Maybe put some funding to land cover, for example, to help them with their planning efforts.
Another layer that hasn't gotten any attention is the GNIS layer, which is used by a lot of other framework layers, specifically like hydro. And that's actually come into the news lately. If you've seen some of the work of renaming of certain lakes up in the Whitefish area. So that's something else to kind of consider, is that we still value, and it's almost like a position, we still value these and how they interact with other framework layers, and kind of getting that to what you were saying, Jenny.
We certainly don't have the resources to invest in all of them, but I think it's appropriate for the council to weigh in on those that would be priorities, either through the grant program and or through more direct investment. Maybe that's something that's captured up under council priorities.
I guess I have I'm just trying to take in everything that's been said, and I just have a question on the geo-enabled elections. Is that I guess a proven enough process and system to make it a tier 1 priority? I mean, do we know it's going to work?
Let's just say it's geo-enabled elections are being integrated now. If MSDI is not a part of it, I think we're missing the boat.
Gotcha.
The Secretary of State's office is moving forward with a system that is going to be using GIS, and many local governments already are using some sort of system that's using GIS. And so going away from the old table, kind of similar to Next Gen, the lookup tables, this is going to be more, a GIS analysis of, are you truly in the district you're receiving the correct ballot for? So that's the point, is basically getting the right ballot to the right voter. And it ties so closely to Next Gen 911, because Next Gen 911 is creating the authoritative addressing coming out of the county. And so for counties to use two separate systems would be just I guess a waste of resources and people's time by not adopting a best practice to use one address layer, and then to have both processes inform each other when a new address comes along. And Frank or Jenny, who's worked in addressing and or elections, or Eric Spangenberg, if you want to speak more to that, please do.
I'd like to add to, this is Janet, that to Dan's question again, and in terms of setting it as a priority, given the what we learned this morning about the census data, it seems to me that we need to be even more focused on trying to make sure these systems work well. And if we're looking at more and more elections where we're going to have to use, remote or mail ballots and other things that require this kind of information, particularly to explain how we're keeping that process safe. It seems like from a policy point of view, again, this would be something we would want to make a priority given our current times and issues that are facing us. So I would support keeping it at a separate focused priority as well.
I wanted to just ask a more general question of those of you who served on the grant subcommittee. How did the process of having the tier 1 and tier 2 priorities work for you? Was that helpful for the grant review process?
I'll speak up as the newbie on the committee this year. It was incredibly helpful, and what I appreciate the back to the geo-enabled elections priority. This is going to be helpful too, because we saw just case in point, we saw a couple of grant applications, and as the newbie, I just didn't know how to prioritize those for and follow the plan here. So no, it was from my perspective, being on the committee, it was incredibly helpful and very important to make sure you were familiar with this plan before you read the grants. And I don't know, call it an instruction manual or whatever, but it was definitely, especially for a new person on the committee, it was really helpful.
Yeah, I'll concur with Dan. It definitely kind of helped. This is Frank. Sorry. It definitely helped kind of establish what some of the criteria for us to review those were, and kind of solidified what standards we're comparing those grant applications against, that to apply them to those priorities.
This is Elena. I agree with that too. It was very helpful to have this, especially in those instances where the application was a little hard to figure out, and you could decide what it meant and what it didn't as far as these priorities went, and scored accordingly.
I appreciate that feedback. That's helpful. Erin, do you want to keep moving down? Are there any other comments about the tier 1 priorities?
Okay, so moving on to the tier 2 priorities. So this is basically to support government workflows, and it's kind of taking the GIS capacity building grant we used to have, and it was really kind of hard to identify. And I think a lot of grant recipients and contractors had issues with that, trying to understand and truly narrow down what GIS capacity building is. And so we've tried to do this in these 3 different priorities for the tier 2 grants. So basically, the GIS planning grant was an idea that that came out of the subcommittee last year, and which I like, and we actually utilized this year. We've identified that sometimes grants are submitted that the scope and the budget and the schedule hasn't been thought out, and sometimes you need that first step of having a GIS planning grant in place to help you get to the part of where you want to eventually become a MSDI data partner or create capacity at the local level. And so this GIS planning grant was to build that plan, and the purpose is to then maybe build the plan, go through the process of creating that plan, working with the state library, and then the next year you would see a very well developed, realistic scope of work and budget and schedule in a GIS project. And so this year we actually deferred one project to becoming a planning grant because the scope was a little wasn't well developed, and we thought that some planning needed to go into it prior to it becoming an MSDI partnership or an MLIA grant. So that was the purpose of that. And Jerry's not on the phone, Jerry Grabens, but he helped us write the one pager about what a GIS planning grant is, and we use that in the application materials. And it being new, we hadn't seen just one for someone coming in and trying to create a plan, but we did, like I said, defer one to becoming a planning grant. And then the second B there is develop base geographic layers that support local information needs. Basically, this is trying to be supportive of state, local, and tribal potential grantees that might need to identify or collect geographic data layers that aren't established in the Tier 1 or maybe do not match up with the MSDI, one of those being water and sewer infrastructure development. So that's basically, that category covers those types of grants. And then finally, we've seen a lot of disaster, emergency response, public safety type of grants come through, and we added community resilience planning. And so the final priority of the Tier 2 priorities includes creation of data or processes or software, hardware to support those types of efforts in the state. So, the COVID response would definitely fall into this category moving forward. So we have man-made, natural, economic hazards or challenges. Maybe we need to add pandemics in here. Any questions there?
I guess just the, I think this one is really well written and captures a lot of those discussions we had. The one thing I might suggest is using the word sustainability or specific to Part B, in that the priority would be not for it to just be a kind of a one-time, one and done deal, but that they build a sustainable system that's, regarding like asset management or infrastructure, that they make it a priority to use the grant money to make sure they're building a sustainable system and, something that can live beyond just submitting the data to the state. Does that make sense?
Yep. Absolutely. I think that's a great comment.
I think this has been a really, really useful addition to the land plan and the grant process.
Do we want to go through all of the MSDI theme leads without having the theme, or themes without having the theme leads on the phone?
I think that's probably not helpful, but just know that Erin always goes through a process every year of coordinating with the theme leads about the priorities for the different themes. I want to help Aaron shape a little bit what we talked about with the council priorities for some specific themes. I think those can tie together nicely and sort of be a differentiation point between kind of what the council sees as priorities and what the theme leads as we see as priorities. And certainly if there's any differing opinions, then those would need to be brought back to the council for further discussion. I know folks are starting to drop off. Aaron, let's drop down to the coordination priorities for those folks who have time to hang with us a little longer.
So the GIS coordination priorities, we've separated it out into, I think it's 4, 5 major sections. One of those being promote the use of GIS in Montana, explore new technology and federal partnership programs, promote best practices and standards, promote the dissemination of GIS data, and then partner with relevant professional associations to educate and encourage the use of GIS in Montana, promote the use of the MSDI, and promote the use of adopted GIS best practices and standards. So some of these I might just tweak a little. If anybody has any feedback now, though, we can certainly discuss these, or you can reach out to me in email. It's going to be hard to coordinate and promote I don't know what the effects are of what this is going to do, but I pray that next fall I'll be able to get out there again. But it might be a strategy we're going to have to discuss as a council of how we coordinate without being able to be in person. It makes things a lot more difficult, and not being able to attend these conferences where I do a lot of interacting and discussing of what we've got going on here, promotion of the MSDI and the grant program. It's hard to do when you're not in person. And some of these conferences that we attend at least twice a year are not going virtual.
Yeah, and just chiming in here. This is Dan. I forget if it's the League of Cities and Towns or MACO, but one of them is. And I mean, case in point, it's a real challenge because the opportunity for non-members to attend is pretty much just an online advertising opportunity more than anything, and it's going to be a challenge to see how we can have that face-to-face, talk about GIS topics at these conventions if they even happen. But yeah, that's a challenge. Yeah, I personally thought for promoting GIS in Montana, MACO and the league are just two, and the Clerk and Recorders Association as well. We're three of the really low-hanging fruit. And it's just weird this year.
And MACO is not being held virtually, or they're not having vendors, but the League of Cities and Towns is, and just kind of exploring that. But these are the times where I actually meet some of my some of the project managers that I work with and coordinate with for the grants, and or I'm meeting with the people who are going to be writing the next year's grants, or giving us the data, or working with commissioners to help them understand the value of GIS in their communities. So.
Any other thoughts, questions regarding coordination?
The next section is the budget, and I will come up with a budget to share with the council based on the current appropriation, which is 938. And then the final is the conclusion. So that's is the document itself. There's a few appendices with, or just one appendix with other additional information. Jenny, I guess we could talk a little bit about, we were going to use Teams to move forward. This could be a good way to use Teams to comment on, further comment on the document.
That sounds good. Will you also create a just a calendar for the council that incorporates the 30-day public comment period and when we would need to meet as a council ahead of the November council meeting, so people have an idea of when the document needs to be ready for posting for public comment?
Sure, absolutely. Did we want to try to put together a subcommittee this year?
I personally feel like this process has worked really well. I don't know how the rest of the council feels, but it's nice to be able to engage a broader council.
Yeah, I'd agree. I kind of feel like we just had a subcommittee meeting, this afternoon. So, this working session was really good. And I don't know. I kind of agree. I don't know if we need one this year.
I think if we put up the document in Teams and let people comment on it, giving them a deadline to accommodate the public comment period, and then pull the entire council back together for a council meeting late October, early November to look at the comments. That'd be great.
Does anyone have issues getting into Teams? It worked pretty well last year for the land information plan. I think we used it for the land information plan subcommittee, but we've also used it on sharing documents for the grants as well, the grant subcommittee.
This is Matt. I think in the past I've had Teams issues, federal firewalls and such, but we have switched to Teams ourselves last January. So hopefully have better luck, those of us.
Great.
Yeah, this is Dan. We use Teams, and I'm excited to use it with you guys too for sharing documents. It's awesome.
I agree.
Collaboration.
Okay, we'll work on getting the team or inviting the council to the current team that we have and we've used for other subcommittees.
All right, again, thank you for hanging with us for quite a bit longer than we anticipated today. Your feedback was very, very helpful and constructive, so I look forward to keeping this process moving forward. Is there any business or announcements from council members? Erin, any updates about the NISJIC conference? You mentioned that briefly. Any information to share?
Yeah, so I sent an email out to the council regarding membership. So we've changed the membership model this year due to the lack of use of funds for travel. And so we're able to, we split the costs with the commission, the Montana State Library Commission, and now all council members and all commission members are covered by the membership and can become NISJIC members, and I would encourage you all to do so. Well, if you do not want to be a member, please let Marlis know. Otherwise, we are adding you all as current members. The mail came.
Great.
And so everyone, the conference is free to attend. It starts next week. Even if you can't attend all sessions, I definitely recommend attending some if you so desire. And it's all virtual. Marlis will help you get registered if you are interested in attending the conference. And then I'm under the assumption that the conference in the mid-year, which is supposed to be held in February in, I do believe, Pittsburgh, will probably be virtual as well. And so there'll be the opportunity for you to attend that conference. If you have any questions or have difficulties getting logged in, let me know. There are tons of resources out there and available to members, including interactive forums on a lot of the initiatives that we participate in, but that at the national level.
Thanks, Erin. Is there any public comment? Any public comment? All right, hearing none. Thank you again for a very productive meeting. We'll go ahead and adjourn.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Nice talking to you all.
You too.
All of you.